Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the stories. My name is Vincent Hawthorne, and I never should have stayed in these woods after dark. The morning started like any other in Glacier National Park. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky pink and orange. Mist floated over the streams like tiny clouds that got lost from the sky. I remember thinking how pretty it all looked as I started my daily patrol. The wind moved through the tall pine trees, making that soft whooshing sound I've grown to love. It carried the sweet smell of wildflowers and sticky pine sap. This place usually feels like heaven to me. I watched eagles circle high above, their cries bouncing off the huge rocky cliffs. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Out here, away from people and their questions, I could finally breathe again. But then something changed. The afternoon sun disappeared way too early, like someone was pulling a curtain across the sky. The shadows around me grew longer and darker than they should have been. Something felt wrong. I tried calling headquarters on my radio for the third time today. Nothing but static came back at me. 3 days with no contact wasn't normal, even in the remote parts of the park. A wolf howled somewhere in the distance. I know that sound well, lonely but beautiful. But this howl cut off suddenly in the middle, like something had stopped it. My skin prickled. Then the fog came, not the normal morning mist, but thick grey clouds that rolled in from nowhere, swallowing trees and rocks that I could see clearly just minutes before. Silent, hungry. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. Frost started forming on the summer grass around me. In minutes, it felt like winter had arrived without warning. The worst part was the silence that settled over everything. No birds chirping, no insects buzzing, no leaves rustling, nothing. Just dead quiet that pressed against my ears like cotton. I've spent my life in wild places, but I've never felt the forest turn so empty, so wrong. Something was coming, and even nature knew to be afraid. Rex whined softly at my side, pressing his warm body against my leg. At least I wasn't completely alone out here. Not yet. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the longest night of my life. I guess I should tell you a bit about myself. I'm 34 years old, though most days I feel much older. Before becoming a park ranger, I was a Marine sharpshooter in the Korean War. That's not something I like to talk about much. I carry a Purple Heart medal in my pocket, not because I'm proud of it, but because it reminds me of my mistakes. There was this village. We got bad information. I still see their faces in my dreams, the ones who didn't make it home because of me. My hand drifted up to the scar that runs from my temple to my jaw, a reminder of that day. My fingers trembled slightly, as they always do when these memories come back. I pushed them away, focusing on the path ahead. 6 months ago, my wife Sarah packed her bags and left. She said she couldn't handle my nightmares anymore, or the drinking that helped me forget them. I don't blame her. "What do you think, Rex?" I asked, looking down at my faithful German shepherd. His milky white eyes stared ahead, unseeing. He'd gone blind just last month from some disease the vet couldn't explain, but his other senses had sharpened to make up for it. Sometimes I think he sees more than I do. I pulled out my father's old compass from my pocket, running my thumb over the scratched metal case. It's the only thing I have from him. He carried it onto the beaches of Normandy in 1944. He made it home. The compass didn't fail him, and it hasn't failed me either, until tonight. I know these woods better than I know myself. Every trail, every cave, every stream within 50 miles. I've mapped them in my head over the years, but tonight, nothing. Looks familiar? It's like I'm walking through a stranger's dream of a forest. Maybe I should turn back, head to the ranger station and wait for morning. No, that's not me. I've never backed down from anything, even when every part of me screams. To run. Stubborn pride, Sarah called it. Maybe she was right. I rubbed my burning eyes. 36 hours without sleep will do that to you. The insomnia's been worse lately. My thoughts get all jumbled when I'm this tired, but I can't stop now. This was supposed to be my last patrol before retiring early. I've got a small place waiting for me in Florida. Sunshine, beaches, no more snow or mountains or memories. Just 2 more days and I'd be gone. But as the strange darkness closed in around me, I had the feeling that Florida might have to wait. Come on, Rex, I whispered, patting his head. Let's figure out what's happening here. The trail ahead disappeared into the thick fog. Behind us, the sun had completely vanished. Though my watch said it was only 4:30 in the afternoon, something was very wrong in these woods, and I had a sinking feeling I was about to find out what. The first thing that really scared me was the trees. I spotted it on an old oak tree, huge scratches gouged deep into the bark. They started at least 10 feet up and raked downward. My flashlight beam traced the marks, and a cold feeling spread through my chest. That's not right, I whispered to Rex. No bear is that big, not even close. I've seen bear marks my whole career. Black bears, grizzlies, I know them all. These were different, deeper, angrier. The forest had gone completely quiet now. Even the wind had stopped moving through the branches. The silence pressed against my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat thumping too fast. That's when I found the elk. It was a big bull, probably 600 pounds when it was alive. Now it lay on its side, perfectly intact except for 2 small punctures on its neck. Its skin was white like paper. When I touched it, the body was still warm, but there wasn't a drop of blood left in it. No animal I know hunts like that. Strange smell filled the air, like copper pennies, metallic, sharp. Rex whimpered and pressed himself against my legs, his blind eyes rolling in fear. It's okay, boy, I said, not believing it myself. We're okay. About a quarter-mile farther, I found the campsite. A family of 4, according to the permit paperwork I'd checked yesterday. The fire was still smoking. Half-eaten hot dogs sat on paper plates like they just stepped away for a minute. But their tents were shredded, torn from the inside out, like they'd been trying to escape from something inside them. But there was no blood, no bodies, nothing. I pulled out my compass, needing some direction, some sense in all this. The needle spun wildly for a few seconds, then stopped, pointing directly at the moon rising over the mountains. The moon shouldn't have been up yet, and it shouldn't have been that color, deep red like cooling embers, a blood moon. My grandmother used to tell stories about blood moons bringing evil things. Vincent. I froze. Someone had whispered my name, a woman's voice. Vincent, help me. It was Sarah's voice, my ex-wife, calling from somewhere deep in the woods. But that was impossible. Sarah was in Chicago, hundreds of miles away. She'd never even been to Glacier National Park. Rex growled, the hair on his back standing straight up. I shined my flashlight in a slow circle, and that's when I noticed the footprints in the soft earth behind me. Boot prints. They matched mine exactly. Same size, same tread pattern, but they were walking backward, following me. The fog swirled around us, thicker than before. As I stared, it seemed to form shapes, fingers, hands, reaching for us. I blinked, hard, just my tired mind playing tricks, I told myself. I turned back to the trail, trying to get my bearings. Something wasn't right. The trail markers, the small blue diamonds nailed to trees, were in the wrong places. I'd put those markers there myself last spring. I knew exactly where each one should be, but now they formed a new path, leading deeper into a part of the forest I didn't recognize, a part that shouldn't exist on any map of the park. We're not. Following that, I told Rex, pulling out my emergency flare. We're going back to the ranger station. I took 3 steps in what I thought was the right direction when Rex suddenly barked. a warning sound I'd never heard him make before. The beam of my flashlight caught movement between the trees ahead. Something big, something fast. And then I heard it, a sound no human or animal should be able to make, like stone grinding against stone, like the mountain itself was waking up. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as dust. "We're not alone out here," I whispered to Rex. "And I don't think we're at the top of the food chain anymore." I caught glimpses of it between the trees, a tall, dark shape moving too fast to be human. One second it was 50 yards away. The next it had shifted to a different spot without seeming to move at all. My skin crawled like ants were marching up and down my arms. Have you ever felt someone watching you? This was worse, much worse. It felt like being studied by something ancient, something that didn't think of me as a person but as prey. The fog cleared just enough for me to see it properly for the first time. My breath caught in my throat. It stood at least 9 feet tall, with arms and legs too long for its body. Black, coarse fur covered it from head to toe, except for its face. Its face was wrong, almost human but stretched, like someone had grabbed the skin and pulled it too tight. But the eyes, God, the eyes! They glowed red in the darkness, reflecting the blood moon overhead like burning coals. They never blinked, just watched, waited. "Vincent," it called, but not in Sarah's voice anymore. This time it spoke with Mike's voice. Mike from my old squad in Korea. Mike who died in my arms after that village went wrong. "Vince, buddy, help me out here. I'm hurt bad." My hands shook as I raised my rifle. "You're not Mike," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Mike's been dead for 10 years. The thing tilted its head like a curious dog. Then it smiled with too many teeth. "Hawthorne," it said, now using Captain Brewer's voice. "My commanding officer, who never made it home. Stand down, soldier. That's an order." I fired 3 shots directly at its chest. The bullets passed right through it, like I was shooting at smoke. The creature didn't even flinch. It just kept watching me with those terrible eyes. "Rex, come on!" I shouted, turning to run, but it was already behind me. I hadn't seen it move. It just appeared there, 9 feet of nightmare blocking my path. A deep growl rumbled from its chest, so low and powerful I felt it in my bones more than heard it. The ground seemed to vibrate beneath my feet. My teeth ached from the sound. I turned again, sprinting in a new direction. Rex stayed close, his nose working overtime to make up for his blind eyes. Every path I chose, the creature was there before, herding me like a sheep. No matter which way I ran, I ended up moving deeper into the unfamiliar forest. That's when I realized Rex wasn't afraid anymore. While I panicked, he seemed focused, alert. His blindness was actually helping him. He wasn't distracted by what the creature looked like. He could sense where it really was, not where it appeared to be. "Rex," I whispered, kneeling down. "Find us a way out, boy." The German shepherd's ears perked up. He sniffed the air, then pulled on my sleeve with his teeth. I followed, trusting him more than my own senses. We ran through the fog, following a path only Rex could detect. The creature's growl grew louder behind us. I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. It was moving on all fours now, more animal than human, covering ground with impossible speed. Rex suddenly stopped, nearly making me trip over him. Ahead of us was a perfect circle of stones, each about the size of a car tire, arranged in the middle of a small clearing. The stones were covered in carvings I didn't recognize, spirals, handprints, animal shapes. The creature had stopped too. It stood at the edge of the trees, watching us. It wouldn't enter the clearing. "What is this place?" I whispered, more to myself than to Rex. The moon overhead seemed to pulse, casting the stone circle in blood red light. I'd worked in this park for years and never seen this place before, but it felt old, very old. Rex whined and backed away from the stones. But we had nowhere else to go. The creature was circling the clearing now, moving between the trees like a shadow, playing with us, waiting. I stepped into the stone circle, pulling Rex gently with me. As soon as we crossed the line of stones, the air felt different, heavier, like being underwater. The creature stopped circling and stood perfectly still. For the first time, I saw something in those glowing eyes that gave me hope, fear. It was afraid of this place. But then it smiled again, wider than any human mouth could stretch, and I realized it hadn't been herding us away from safety. It had been driving us exactly where it wanted us all along. Inside the stone circle, the air felt thick and heavy. The blood moon hung directly overhead now, bigger than I'd ever seen it before. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just any full moon. It was a lunar eclipse. The shadow of the earth was slowly eating away at one edge of the red disk above us. A memory flashed in my mind. Last summer, an old man from the Blackfeet tribe had visited the ranger station. He'd told stories about these mountains, about things that lived here long before people came, things that fed during the blood moon, growing stronger as the eclipse reached its peak. I looked at the creature watching us from just outside the stone circle. It was patient, waiting for something. "It's the eclipse," I whispered to Rex. "It's waiting for the full eclipse, when it'll be strongest." Rex growled, facing the direction of a small stream I could hear bubbling nearby. He tugged at my pants, leg, pulling me toward the sound of running water. The creature must have sensed what we were planning. It let out a horrible scream, not animal, not human, and lunged toward the circle. But it stopped right at the edge, unable or unwilling to cross the line of stones. I ran for the stream, Rex leading the way. The water glinted silver in the moonlight, cutting through the forest like a lifeline. I splashed across, nearly slipping on the wet rocks. When I reached the other side and turned back, the creature stood at the water's edge, pacing back and forth like an angry tiger. It couldn't cross running water. For the first time since nightfall, I felt a spark of hope. If we could follow this stream down the mountain, we might make it to the ranger station by morning. I might be able to warn someone about what was happening here. I took 2 steps downstream when a massive shadow leaped over the water, landing right in front of me. The creature had jumped across. The stream wasn't wide enough to stop it completely. Its arms swung out, catching my shoulder. The pain was instant and blinding. I felt something pop as my shoulder was knocked out of place. I fell hard, my rifle clattering away into the darkness. "Rex, run!" I shouted, but my faithful dog stood his ground, teeth bared at the monster. I scrambled backward with my good arm, my dislocated shoulder hanging useless at my side. The pain made it hard to think, hard to move, but I had to keep going. For Rex, for the campers who might still be alive somewhere, for anyone else who might wander into these woods during a blood moon. The creature advanced slowly now. It knew I was hurt, knew I couldn't escape. It was enjoying this. My hand touched something cold and metal in the dirt, my father's compass. It had fallen from my pocket during the fall. The case had popped open, revealing not just the compass needle, but something I'd forgotten was there, a small silver crucifix. My father's good luck charm, tucked inside the compass case all these years, silver. The old Blackfeet man had mentioned that too. These creatures, whatever they were, feared 2 things, running water and silver. I had 1 emergency flare left, in my belt pouch. With my good hand, I fumbled it out along with my lighter. The creature was only feet away now, its red eyes glowing brighter as the eclipse neared completion. "Hey!" I shouted, surprising both myself and the creature with my boldness. "You want me? Come and get me." It hesitated just for a second. That was all I needed. I struck the lighter and held it to the flare. It ignited with a blinding red glow, hissing and spitting sparks. The creature recoiled from the sudden light. With the flare burning in one hand, I held the silver crucifix in the flame. The metal heated quickly, starting to melt at the edges. The creature realized what I was doing. It lunged forward with a howl that shook the trees. I had one chance, one shot. I threw the half-melted silver directly at the creature's chest. At the same moment, Rex launched himself at the monster's legs, his teeth finding purchase in the coarse fur. The silver struck home, sinking into the creature's flesh. A scream unlike anything I've ever heard tore through the night, rage and pain and something else, something ancient dying. The creature's body began to change. The fur receded. The limbs shortened. For just a moment I saw something almost human in its face. Confusion, fear, relief. Then it collapsed, its body dissolving into the forest floor like morning dew, leaving nothing behind but a dark stain on the earth. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't work. Looking down, I saw why. The creature's claws had caught me across the stomach during its final attack. Blood, my blood, was pooling around me, soaking into the ground. "It's okay, Rex," I whispered as my dog limped to my side, whining softly. "We did it. We stopped it." The pain was fading now, which I knew wasn't a good sign. The moon overhead was returning to its normal color as the eclipse ended. The forest sounds were coming back, insects chirping, an owl hooting somewhere nearby. The world was returning to normal. I put my arm around Rex, pulling him close as the cold crept up my legs and into my chest. "Good boy," I whispered, my voice getting weaker. "Such a good boy. Stay with me, okay? Just for a little while." Rex licked my face, sensing what was happening. His blind eyes somehow looked right into mine. The stars were so bright now. Had they always been that bright? As my eyes grew heavy, I thought I saw figures moving through the trees, people with flashlights, voices calling my name, but it was too late for rescue. I'd done what I needed to do. The creature was gone. The forest was safe. Rex would be looked after. That was enough. My name is Catherine Brennan, and I still dream about the day I entered that forest. The rain tapped gently on the ancient cedar trees around me, creating a soothing melody that normally would have calmed my nerves. I walked slowly through what felt like a green cathedral, with trees so tall and old they seemed to touch the sky. Everything was covered in moss. The ground, the trees, even the air felt heavy with it. I breathed in deeply. The forest smelled rich and alive, like wet earth and rotting leaves mixed with the fresh scent of new plants pushing through the soil. This was why I became a park ranger, this feeling of being part of something bigger than myself. But standing there, surrounded by these giants, I felt so small. Not in a bad way, though. It was comforting somehow, like being wrapped in a big green blanket. These trees had been here for 1,000 years. They'd seen it all, and they were still standing. Maybe I could learn something from them? The light was already fading, even though it was only late afternoon. Under these thick branches, darkness comes early. The shadows stretched longer around me, turning familiar shapes into strange silhouettes. I told myself it was just my imagination, making them look like they were reaching for me. I tried my CB radio again. Nothing but static. "Ranger Brennan checking in," I said, knowing nobody would answer. The thick canopy above me blocked all signals. I was completely alone out here. That's when I heard it. A raven's harsh cry breaking the quiet. But something about it made the hair on my neck stand up. It sounded almost human, like someone trying to mimic a bird, but not quite getting it right. The fog was getting thicker by the minute. Usually I can see at least 50 feet ahead on the trail, but now I could barely see my own boots. It rolled in unnaturally fast, swirling around my legs like it had a mind of its own. A loud creak made me jump, then another. The trees were groaning and shifting, their branches moving slightly. But there wasn't any wind, not even a breeze. Everything was perfectly still, except for those moving branches. As darkness fell completely, I noticed something strange about the fallen logs around me. They were glowing, a soft, greenish light pulsing from the rotting wood. I'd seen phosphorescent fungi before, but never like this. The light throbbed slowly, steadily, like a heartbeat. Murphy, my Irish setter, pressed against my leg. Even he seemed to sense something wasn't right. I reached down to scratch behind his ears, as much to comfort myself as him. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, not entirely believing it myself. "We're just going to check this section and head back to the station." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching us, waiting for something. And whatever it was, I had a sinking feeling we were about to find out. I guess I should tell you a bit about myself. I'm 29 years old, and before I became a park ranger, I was a medic in the army. I served in Vietnam, where I saw things no one should ever have to see. I saved a lot of lives over there, patching up soldiers with whatever I had on hand. But I couldn't save everyone. My twin brother Michael died in a friendly fire incident, a napalm strike that hit the wrong target. Our target. Some days, I still feel like half of me is missing. After I came home, I needed quiet, peace, space to breathe without smelling smoke and blood. That's why I took this job in Olympic National Forest. The trees don't judge you for waking up screaming. My hands are rough and calloused from years of hard work, but they never shake when it matters. People tell me my green eyes show too much, that they can see right through me to all the pain I carry. Maybe that's why my fiancé Tom left 6 months ago. He said he couldn't handle my nightmares anymore, the way I'd fight invisible enemies. In my sleep, I don't blame him. At least I still have Murphy. He's been with me through everything, a big, goofy Irish setter with soulful eyes and endless loyalty. Sometimes I swear he understands every word I say. When the bad dreams come, he's always there, pressing his warm body against mine until the shaking stops. I touch the dog tags hanging around my neck, Michael's, wrapped around a St. Christopher medal our mother gave us when we enlisted. "Watch over us," she'd said. Well, it worked for one of us at least. "Come on, Murphy," I said, adjusting my backpack. "Let's keep moving. In my 3 years as a ranger here, I've memorized every plant, every animal track, every bird call in. These woods, it's my job to know when something doesn't belong, and right now everything felt wrong. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. The dreams kept coming, jungle warfare mixed with something new and strange. Dark shapes moving between trees. Voices calling my name from places no voice should be. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. That's partly why I'd put in for a transfer to Yellowstone. New mountains, new forests, new memories to make. Just 1 more month and I'd be starting fresh. No more ghosts from the past. Or so I thought. People at the ranger station call me reckless. Maybe they're right. When hikers go missing or someone gets hurt on the trail, I'm always the first to volunteer for search and rescue. My supervisor says I take too many chances, but when someone needs help, I can't just sit back. I've seen what happens when help comes too late. As Murphy and I pushed deeper into the forest, that familiar feeling crept up my spine. The same alertness I felt on patrol in Vietnam, like something was watching us, hunting us. Just paranoia, I whispered to myself. Just the war following. "You home." But Murphy's ears were perked up too, his body tense beside mine. And Murphy never gets spooked without good reason. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the canopy above, each drop hitting the ground with a sound that seemed too loud in the unnatural quiet. Something was about to happen. I could feel it in my bones, the same way I could feel a storm coming or an ambush waiting around the bend. I adjusted my ranger hat and took a deep breath. "Stay close, boy," I told Murphy. "I don't like this at all." Little did I know then just how right I was to be afraid. The first truly strange thing I noticed was the trees. About a mile into my patrol route, I stopped dead in my tracks. Several of the massive cedars had their bark stripped away in perfect spirals, like someone had taken a giant corkscrew to them. The exposed wood underneath was raw and pale, almost like skin after a bandage comes off. "What on earth?" I whispered, running my fingers over the smooth groove. This wasn't natural. Bears sometimes claw at trees, and humans carve into them, but this was different, too perfect, too deliberate. As I examined the trees, I suddenly realized how quiet it had gotten. 1 minute, the forest was alive with sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, the distant chattering of squirrels. The next minute, nothing. Complete silence fell like someone had flipped a switch. Even the constant dripping of rainwater seemed to pause. Murphy growled low in his throat, his tail straight, out behind him instead of wagging. "What is it, boy?" I asked, my hand automatically moving to the knife on my belt. I didn't carry a gun on regular patrols, something I was starting to regret. Murphy trotted ahead a few yards and then stopped, his nose pointing at something just off the trail. I followed him and immediately wished I hadn't. It was a deer skeleton, but something was terribly wrong with it. Someone, or something, had put it back together all wrong. The rib cage was turned inside out, with the smooth inner surfaces facing outward. The legs were attached backwards, knee joints bending the wrong way. It didn't look like the work of a predator or scavenger. It looked arranged. A sickly, sweet smell filled the air like rotting flowers, but underneath it was the unmistakable stench of decaying flesh. My stomach turned, but I'd smelled worse in Vietnam. Still, this was different. Wrong. "Let's keep moving," I told Murphy, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. About half a mile further, I spotted color through the trees, something bright that didn't belong in the natural greens and browns of the forest. I stepped off the trail to investigate and found a backpacker's gear hanging from branches about 30 feet up. A red sleeping bag, a blue tent, cooking equipment, clothes, all suspended high above the ground, arranged in a strange pattern that almost looked like a face when you stepped back and squinted. No ladder or rope showed how it got up there. No human could have climbed that high with all that gear. My flashlight beam caught something in the branches nearby. Thin strands stretched between trees, forming complicated web-like patterns. But they weren't spider webs. They were too thick, too strong. I touched one carefully and pulled my hand back immediately. It looked like hair and sinew woven together, human hair. That's when I heard the children. Their voices came from somewhere below me, crying softly, calling for help. They sounded like they were underground, in cave systems I knew ran beneath parts of the forest, but children shouldn't be down there. There was no entrance nearby. "Hello," I called out. "Ranger Brennan here. Are you hurt?" The crying stopped, instantly. Then, after a moment, it started again, but different, like someone trying to imitate a child's cry, but not quite getting it right. I shined my flashlight around, trying to get my bearings. The fog was still thick, but now it seemed to be forming actual shapes, squares, triangles, long corridors between trees where there should be only random mist. It was as if the fog was building a maze around me. That's when I noticed the footprints in the mud. They were human-shaped at first glance, a heel, an arch, 5 toes, but the proportions were all wrong. The feet were too long, and the way they pressed into the mud suggested legs that bent backwards, like a bird's. Something was very, very wrong in my forest. I pulled out my map, but what I saw made no sense. The trail markers nearby had been changed, pointing toward areas that weren't on any map I'd ever seen. Trails that shouldn't exist. "Murphy," I whispered, "I think we need to head back to the station." But as I turned around, I realized I wasn't sure which way that was anymore. The fog had closed in completely, and nothing looked familiar. Even the sun was hidden, so I couldn't use it to navigate. We were lost. And something told me that was exactly what whatever lived here wanted. Murphy's ears suddenly perked up. He stared intently into the dense wall of trees and fog in front of us, a low growl building in his chest. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, straining to see what had caught his attention. Then I felt it, the lightest touch, like a thread brushing against my cheek. I swiped at it, but my hand passed through empty air. Another touch on my arm, my neck, my back. Invisible strands testing me, measuring me. Something was hunting us, and it was getting closer. It started as a shadow, taller and wider than any human should be. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the fog, my mind making monsters out of trees. But then it moved. Murphy's barking turned frantic. His whole body trembled. But brave as always, he placed himself between me and the approaching shadow. "Stay back," I warned, though I knew my voice sounded weak. Who was I kidding? I had a knife, a flashlight, and a dog against whatever this was. The fog parted, and I saw it clearly for the first time. I've tried 1,000 times since to convince myself it wasn't real, that I was just tired, stressed, seeing things, but I know what I saw. It stood at least 12 feet tall, balanced, on 8 long, segmented legs like a giant spider. But where a spider's head should be, there was a pale, stretched human torso with multiple arms ending in hands that weren't quite hands anymore, more like claws or talons, sharp and glistening wet. Its face, God, its face. Eyes like black diamonds, reflecting my flashlight beam in dozens of tiny mirrors. They moved independently, taking in everything, missing nothing. When it spoke, I nearly collapsed. The sound came not from one mouth, but seemed to flow from its entire body, a chorus of different voices speaking in perfect unison. "Catherine," they said, "my name," in the voices of men, women, even children, all speaking together, all trapped, somewhere inside that thing. "What are you?" I managed to ask, my throat so tight I could barely push the words out. "We are many," the voices answered. "We are patient. We are hungry." I fired my emergency flare gun directly at it. The bright red light hit its chest and bounced off, leaving not even a mark on its hard shell-like skin. It made a sound that might have been laughter. I felt something brush against my skin again, those invisible threads, stronger now. They seemed to be testing me, searching for weak points. I swatted them away, but more came, sticking to my clothes, my hair, my face. The creature didn't rush toward us. Instead, it moved with a terrible patience, spinning its web, narrowing, our escape routes one by one. It knew we had nowhere to go. A rhythmic clicking sound came from its throat, perfectly timed with the movement of its legs. Click-step, click-step, click-step. The sound made my skin crawl. "Run, Murphy!" I shouted, turning to sprint in the opposite direction. But the threads were everywhere now, sticking to us, slowing us down. I slashed at them with my knife, but for every strand I cut, 3 more seemed to appear. We pushed through the web, running blindly through the fog. Behind us, the clicking continued, unhurried. It didn't need to chase us. It was herding us. I caught glimpses of other shapes hanging from trees as we ran, cocoons of some kind, wrapped in the same webbing that now covered parts of my uniform. With a sick feeling, I realized they were human-shaped, and some of them were moving. "Help us!" a weak voice called from one of the cocoons as we passed. "Please, we're still alive in here." I wanted to stop, to help, but the clicking was getting closer. Murphy tugged at my pant leg, urging me forward. We broke into a small clearing, and for a moment I thought we might have a chance. Then I saw them, more of the creatures, smaller than the first but just as nightmarish, moving among the trees at the clearing's edge. We were surrounded. The largest one, the one that had spoken my name, emerged from the fog behind us. In the slightly better light of the clearing, I could see details I'd missed before. Its human torso was covered in scars and strange markings, some of which looked like writing in a language I'd never seen. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, playing for time while my eyes darted around, looking for any escape route. "We feed," The chorus of voices replied, "Not on flesh, but on fear, on hope, on the moment hope dies." The smaller creatures began to close in, spinning webs between them, cutting off any chance of escape. That's when Murphy did the bravest. Most foolish thing I've ever seen. He charged straight at the largest creature, teeth bared, a furious growl tearing from his throat. "Murphy, no!" I screamed, but it was too late. The creature reared back, surprised by the attack. Murphy's teeth sank into one of its legs, and it made a horrible screeching sound. The first sign that it could feel pain. The distraction was enough. I spotted a gap between two of the smaller creatures and ran for it, slashing wildly with my knife. "Murphy!" I called over my shoulder, but my brave dog was still locked in combat with the monster, buying me time to escape. The last I saw of him, he was still fighting, still protecting me, just as he always had. I ran blindly through the forest, tears streaming down my face, the sounds of battle fading behind me. I had abandoned my best friend to save myself, and the shame of it burned worse than any physical pain. But I knew I couldn't help him if I was caught too. I needed to find help, weapons, something to fight these creatures. And I needed to help those people trapped in the cocoons, if they were still alive. As I ran, a new determination replaced my fear. I would come back. I would fight. I would make these monsters pay for what they'd done to my forest, to those hikers, to Murphy. First, though, I had to survive. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes? Hours? Time seemed to stretch and bend in that fog. My lungs burned and my legs felt like rubber, but I kept going, pushing through branches and webs, ignoring the scratches on my face and arms. Eventually, I stumbled into a ravine I recognized from my patrols. A waterfall thundered nearby, and something clicked in my brain. The map. This ravine wasn't far from one of our emergency supply caches, where we kept gear for lost hikers or rangers in trouble. The cache was hidden in a hollow tree trunk, and I prayed it hadn't been discovered by the creatures. My hands shook as I found the old cedar and pulled away the fake bark door. Thank God, everything was still there. Emergency radio, though I doubted it would work in this fog. First aid kit, flares, matches, and best of all, a shotgun with 2 boxes of shells. As I loaded the gun, a plan started forming in my mind. Those people in the cocoons needed me. Murphy needed me, if he was still alive. Running away wasn't an option anymore. I had to find the creature's main nest, their home base, and I thought I knew where it might be. During my first year as a ranger, I discovered a network of caves near this ravine. They were off-limits to hikers because of unstable ground, but they extended deep under the forest. A perfect hiding place for monsters. The cave entrance was partly hidden behind the waterfall. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside, shotgun ready. The temperature dropped immediately, and that sickly sweet smell grew stronger. I was on the right track. The tunnel sloped downward, winding deeper under the forest. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the walls glistened with moisture and something else. More of those web-like strands, thicker here, forming patterns that almost looked like writing. My flashlight beam caught movement ahead, a small spider creature, no bigger than a dog, skittering along the tunnel wall. Before it could alert the others, I fired the shotgun. The blast was deafening in the confined space, but effective. The creature fell to the ground, legs curling inward. But the shotgun's boom echoed through the tunnels. If there was any element of surprise before, it was gone now. I moved faster, following the increasing number of webs. They were everywhere, now, hanging from the ceiling, stretched across the floor, forming a dense network that I had to cut through with my knife. The tunnel widened into a large chamber, and what I saw there nearly broke me. Dozens of cocoons hung from the ceiling and walls, each one containing a person. Some were still, others moved weakly, struggling against their silken prisons, and at the center of it all was a massive web, with the largest creature, the one that had spoken my name, sitting in the middle like a grotesque spider queen. Around the edges of the chamber were bones, hundreds of them arranged in strange patterns. Some looked decades, maybe centuries old. This thing had been here a long time. And there, at the edge of the web, was Murphy, alive but trapped in a partially completed cocoon, still fighting weakly against the sticky threads. "Murphy!" I couldn't help calling out. His ears perked up at my voice and he whined. The large creature turned toward me, those black diamond eyes reflecting my flashlight in 100 tiny points of light. "Catherine Brennan," the chorus of voices said, "you've come home to us." "This isn't my home," I said, raising the shotgun, and "Those people aren't yours to take." I fired directly at its face. The creature moved with impossible speed, dodging the blast, then scuttled up the wall and across the ceiling, moving so fast my eyes could barely track it. I fired again and again, but it was like trying to shoot a shadow. The chamber filled with the sound of gunshots and the horrible clicking noise the creature made as it moved. Then I was out of shells. The shotgun clicked empty, and the creature seemed to sense my vulnerability. It dropped from the ceiling, landing just feet away from me. "Now you join our collection," the voices said. "Your fear is exceptional. It will feed us for years." I backed away, my mind racing. What did I have left? Knife, flashlight, flares, medical kit. Medical kit. In Vietnam, we sometimes had to improvise weapons when supplies ran low. I remembered how to make an incendiary device using alcohol, gauze, and matches. As the creature advanced, I pretended to stumble, dropping to one knee. With lightning speed, I grabbed the medical kit from my belt, pulled out the bottle of alcohol, stuffed gauze into the top, and lit it with a match. The makeshift Molotov cocktail ignited with a whoosh. I hurled it directly at the creature's human torso, the only part that didn't seem protected by that hard shell. The bottle shattered and flames engulfed the creature. It screamed, not in many voices now, but in one horrifying shriek of pain. It thrashed wildly, its legs flailing as the fire spread across its body. The smell was awful, burning hair and something else, something chemical and strange. The smaller creatures rushed in from side tunnels, confused and agitated by their leader's distress. I used the distraction to dash to Murphy's side, cutting him free with my knife. He was weak, but alive, pressing against my leg gratefully. "We've got to free the others," I told him, already moving toward the nearest cocoon. Inside was a young woman, barely conscious but still breathing. I slashed open the silky prison and helped her sit up. "Can you walk?" I asked. She nodded weakly. "There are more of us," she whispered, "so many more." "I know. We're getting everyone out." The burning creature was still thrashing, setting fire to its own web. The flames spread quickly, igniting the dry silk strands throughout the chamber. We didn't have much time. Moving as fast as I could, I cut down cocoon after cocoon. 12 people in all, in various states of consciousness. Some could walk, others had to be carried by those who were stronger. "Follow the tunnel back up," I instructed them, pointing toward the entrance. "There's a waterfall at the end. Get to the ranger station and call for help." "What about you?" one of the men asked. "I'll be right behind you. I need to make sure there aren't any more victims." But the truth was, I needed to make sure these creatures never hunted in my forest again. As the survivors helped each other toward the exit, I grabbed more medical supplies from my kit, more alcohol, more gauze, my last few matches. I set fire to every web I could reach, watching as the flames climbed up the walls and across the ceiling of the chamber. The smaller creatures were in panic now, running in all directions. Many were already burning. The largest one had stopped moving, but I wasn't taking any chances. I approached cautiously, knife ready. Its black eyes were dull now, no longer reflecting light. But as I got closer, one leg twitched, then another. It wasn't dead yet. "This is for Murphy," I said, raising my knife, "and for all the people you've hurt." But before I could strike, Murphy barked a warning from across the chamber. I turned to see the tunnel entrance collapsing as the fire weakened the cave's structure. Rocks and dirt poured down, threatening to block our only way out. I had to choose, finish the creature or escape while I still could. But looking at those dull eyes, I knew the fire would finish what I'd started. Nothing could survive this inferno. "Come on, Murphy," I called, running for the exit. My loyal dog limped after me, favoring one leg but moving as fast as he could. We reached the tunnel just as more of the ceiling gave way. I pushed Murphy ahead of me, then dove forward as rocks crashed down behind us. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, but I kept crawling, kept pushing forward. The tunnel was filling with smoke now, making it hard to see, hard to breathe. My eyes stung, and my lungs burned. Murphy whined ahead of me, urging me to keep moving. "I'm coming, boy," I gasped, crawling over fallen rocks and burning web fragments. After what felt like an eternity, I saw light ahead, the cave entrance. Fresh air hit my face as I staggered out, Murphy at my side. Behind us, smoke poured from the cave mouth as the fire consumed everything inside. We collapsed on the bank of the stream, gasping for breath. The survivors were there too, huddled together, injured but alive. "You did it," one of them said. "You saved us." I looked down at Murphy, who was licking a burn on his paw. "We did it," I corrected. But even as relief washed over me, I noticed something disturbing. At the edge of the clearing, hanging between two trees, was a single strand of web, fresh and new, glistening in the fading light. One of the smaller creatures had escaped. Or worse, there were eggs somewhere, hidden deep in the cave system, where the fire couldn't reach them. This wasn't over. Maybe it would never be over. But for now, we were alive, and that was enough. I scratched behind Murphy's ears as he leaned against me, both of us battered and exhausted. "Good boy," I whispered. "The best boy." Later, after rescue teams arrived and the survivors were taken to hospitals, after the forest fire crews contained the blaze to just the cave system, after I gave my report, leaving out the more unbelievable details, I sat alone in my cabin with Murphy sleeping at my feet. I called Yellowstone that night and canceled my transfer request. I couldn't leave now. This was my forest, my responsibility. And somewhere out there, something was waiting, watching, growing stronger. Next spring, I'd be ready. My name is Daniel Morrison, and I still remember that autumn day in 1984 when everything changed. The memory is burned into my mind like a photograph, the kind you wish you could forget, but never will. I was alone that morning at Adirondack Park, watching the sunrise paint the mountains. The lake was so still it looked like glass, perfectly reflecting the red maples and golden birch trees that surrounded it. Fall had turned the forest into something magical, all those fiery colors, making the mountains look like they were burning without smoke. The loons were calling to each other across the water. If you've never heard a loon's cry, it's hard to explain. Haunting is the word that comes closest. Their voices bounced off the mountains, making it sound like there were dozens of them instead of just a few. The air was cool that morning, with that special crispness that whispers winter is coming. I could smell wood smoke from cabins hidden somewhere in the trees. As a park ranger, I'd grown to love these quiet moments. This untouched wilderness felt like the only place I could find any peace anymore. I remember checking my watch. It was just past noon when the sky began to change. The storm clouds came out of nowhere, rolling in faster than any natural weather I'd seen in my 15 years outdoors. 1 minute, blue skies. The next, a darkness so deep and purple it almost looked black. I reached for my two-way radio to call the station, but all I got was static and these strange musical tones that came at perfect intervals, like some kind of code or signal. I tried different channels, but it was the same on all of them. That's when I noticed the owl, just one sitting in an oak tree nearby. It hooted once, but the sound stretched out impossibly long, echoing until it didn't even sound like an owl anymore. Then the mist started rising from the lake, even though it wasn't cold enough yet for that kind of fog. The strange thing was how it moved. Not like normal mist that just drifts. This stuff swirled and gathered into shapes that almost looked like people dancing on the water. The temperature dropped so fast, I could see my breath suddenly clouding in front of me. Frost began forming right before my eyes on leaves that were still green. In October, that just doesn't happen, not even in the Adirondacks. But the strangest thing, the thing that made the hair on my neck stand up, was the silence that fell. 1 second there were birds calling, leaves rustling, water lapping at the shore. The next, nothing, like someone had hit a mute button on the whole world. I've been in some scary situations before, but standing there in that unnatural quiet, I knew something was very wrong with my peaceful wilderness. And I had no idea just how wrong things were about to get. I should probably tell you a bit about myself. I'm 42 years old, though most days I feel much older. Before becoming a park ranger here, I was a firefighter with the Forest Service in Colorado. That job, it changed me. 2 years ago, in the summer of '82, I lost 8 men in a wildfire that none of us saw coming. The weather shifted without any warning, just like those storm clouds today. 1 minute we were containing the fire, the next it was all around us. I can still hear their screams sometimes, especially at night when it's quiet. My wife says, well, my ex-wife now, she used to say my eyes were kind. I don't know about that. When I look in the mirror, all I see are eyes that have seen too much smoke and death. My beard's gone salt and pepper now, more salt than pepper these days. Jenny left last year. Can't blame her. Who wants to watch their husband drink himself to sleep every night? She tried to help, but some wounds don't heal, no matter how much love you pour into them. At least I'm not completely alone. I've got Bandit, my border collie mix. Found him as a pup during that Colorado fire, hiding under a fallen log. His mother didn't make it. Guess we both survived when others didn't. He understands me better than most people do. I reached into my pocket and felt the smooth bone whistle my grandfather gave me when I was just a boy. He was half Cherokee, and he told me his people had used whistles like this for protection against evil spirits. I'm not sure I believed in spirits back then. Now I'm not so sure. Grandpa taught me all the old legends about these mountains. I probably know more stories than some of the tribal elders. Tales about spirits in the water, in the trees, in the very rocks. Stories I used to think were just meant to scare kids into behaving. People at the station say I've got a problem with trying to save everyone. Maybe they're right. That stubborn streak has gotten me into trouble more times than I can count. But when someone needs help, I can't just walk away. Not after Colorado. I winced as I shifted my pack. The burn scars covering about a third of my body never really stop hurting. Some days are worse than others. Today, with the strange cold setting in, the pain was flaring up bad. Next spring, I'm planning to retire. Buy a few small cabins by a different lake. Rent them out to tourists. Something quiet and safe. No more fires, no more rescues, no more responsibility for other people's lives. But as I stood there by that silent lake, watching that unnatural mist swirl across the water, retirement suddenly felt very far away. Bandit pressed against my leg, whining softly. He felt it too. Something wasn't right in these woods anymore, and as the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, I realized the silence wasn't just strange. It was waiting. I decided to walk along the shoreline to check things out. That's when I saw them. Strange markings carved into the big boulders at the water's edge. They looked ancient, like pictures instead of words, showing stick figures dancing around something tall and thin. The weird thing was, I'd walked this exact path yesterday, and those carvings definitely weren't there. "What do you think, Bandit?" I whispered. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. Bandit didn't bark or whine like he normally would. He just stared at the lake, his ears perked forward. The silence was getting to me. If you've ever been in a forest, you know it's never really quiet. There's always something. Wind in the leaves, water moving, squirrels chattering, birds calling. But now, nothing. Like the whole world was holding its breath. About 100 yards further, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. A perfect circle of animal bones, small ones, probably from rabbits and squirrels, arranged in a spiral pattern around what looked like the remains of a campfire. But the ashes were cold, like the fire had been out for days. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone there?" My voice just disappeared into the silence. That's when I heard it. Music. A slow, sad melody that seemed to float across the water from the small island in the middle of the lake. It sounded like a flute, but deeper, more hollow. There was something about that music that made my chest tighten. I keep a canoe tied up near my cabin, so I decided to paddle out and investigate. Nobody was supposed to be camping on that island. It was off limits to visitors. As I pushed the canoe into the water, I saw something that made me freeze. There were faces in the water, reflections of people standing behind me. I spun around, but there was nobody there. When I looked back at the water, the faces were gone. My hands shook as I checked my compass. The needle was spinning wildly before stopping, pointing directly toward the music instead of north. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of it. When I opened them again, the compass was still pointing to the island. The music changed then. It became familiar somehow. Within the melody, I could hear voices. Voices I knew. "Daniel, Daniel." They were calling my name, the men from my crew, the ones who died in Colorado. I dropped the compass, covering my ears, but the voices didn't stop. "This isn't real," I said out loud. "This can't be happening." I looked down and noticed something else strange. The frost on the ground wasn't random. It had formed patterns that looked like musical notes, like sheet music written in ice across the leaves and dirt. And it was warm now. The frost shouldn't have been there at all. A thick fog began rolling in from the lake, swirling in time with the distant music. It moved like it was alive, creating shapes that seemed to dance and beckon me toward the water. I backed away, grabbing Bandit's collar to keep him close. I decided to head back to my cabin, but after 20 minutes of walking, I found myself at the lakeshore again, staring at the same carved boulders I'd seen earlier. I tried a different trail, but again ended up back at the lake. No matter which way I went, the paths all led me back to the water and that haunting music. The sun was getting low now, though it was hard to tell with the strange purple clouds. I had the sinking feeling that I needed to solve this mystery before darkness fell, because whatever was playing that music, whatever had silenced the forest and drawn those faces in the water, I didn't want to meet it in the dark. "Come on, Bandit," I whispered, heading toward the canoe again. "We need to find out what's on that island." As we pushed off from shore, the music grew louder, and Bandit began to whimper. I felt it too, a pull, like the melody was a rope tied around my heart, drawing me forward. And with each stroke of the paddle, the voices of my dead friends called, more clearly through the mist. The island wasn't far, maybe 100 yards from shore, but that short paddle felt like it took hours. The water was unnaturally still, like I was rowing through black glass. The closer we got to the island, the colder it became. My breath clouded in front of me, and my fingers grew numb around the paddle. When the canoe finally bumped against the rocky shore of the island, the music stopped. The sudden silence was almost worse than the haunting melody. "Stay," I whispered to Bandit, but he wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on something in the trees, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. I climbed out of the canoe, my boots crunching on the frosted pebbles. The island wasn't big, maybe the size of a football field, with a small clearing in the center surrounded by twisted pine trees. I took a few steps forward, and that's when I saw it. A figure emerged from the mist. Tall and thin, it looked like a skeleton wrapped in tattered buckskin. Where its face should have been, there were only dark, empty eye sockets, but somehow I could feel them watching me. In its bony hands, it held what looked like a flute, but not any flute I'd ever seen. It was yellowish white, long and curved. With a sick feeling in my stomach, I realized it was made from a human leg bone. The cold intensified as the figure moved closer. It didn't walk like a normal person. Its feet hovered just above the ground, like it was floating. Blue flames danced around its skeletal fingers as it raised the bone flute to where its lips should have been. When it began to play again, I felt like someone had dumped ice water down my spine. The music was beautiful and terrible all at once. It made me want to weep and scream and dance all at the same time. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" The figure didn't answer, at least not with words. But as the melody changed, images flashed in my mind. An old Native American shaman, feared by his own people for his dark magic, cursed to wander forever, playing his flute of bone to lure the living into the lake, feeding on their fear and final breaths as they drowned. I backed away, nearly tripping over a rock. "Stay back," I warned, though I knew it was useless. I picked up a branch and swung it at the figure, but it passed right through, like I was trying to hit smoke or mist. The entity moved to block my path back to the canoe. Walls of blue flame suddenly appeared to my left and right, too hot to pass through. I was trapped. Behind me, Bandit started howling. Not his normal bark, but a long, mournful sound that somehow matched the rhythm of the flute music. To my horror, I saw him slowly walking toward the water's edge, as if in a trance. "Bandit, no!" I shouted, running to grab his collar. But as I held him back, I felt the same pull. The music was calling to me too, whispering that it would be so easy to walk into the cool water, to let go of all the pain and guilt I'd been carrying. I could join my crew, be with them again. I shook my head hard, trying to clear it. This thing, whatever it was using my own memories against me. The skeletal shaman floated closer. The music grew more intense, and with each note, I felt my will weakening. Frost began forming on my jacket, my beard, my eyelashes. Not normal frost, it shaped itself into the same spiral patterns I'd seen in the bone circle on the shore. I tried to move away, but my feet felt heavy, like they were sinking into the ground. The entity circled around me, playing faster now. In the lake beyond, I could see faces in the water, dozens of them, pale and still, with wide open eyes. Past victims, I realized with horror, people who had heard the music and walked into the depths. And if I didn't find a way to stop this thing, Bandit and I would be joining them soon. I reached into my pocket with trembling fingers, feeling for my grandfather's bone whistle. It seemed to pulse with warmth against my frozen skin, the only heat in this nightmare of ice and death. My grandfather's words came back to me: "When darkness calls, answer with the voice of your ancestors." As the skeletal shaman raised its flute for what felt like a final deadly melody, I clutched the whistle tightly in my fist. I didn't know if it would work, but I was out of options. The sun had nearly set now, and in the fading purple light, the shaman's empty eye sockets began to glow with an eerie blue fire, the same color as the flames that had trapped me on this island of death. I raised the whistle to my lips with shaking hands. The bone felt warm against my frozen skin, like it was alive somehow. The skeletal shaman tilted its head, watching me with those empty eye sockets. Suddenly, I understood what was happening. The markings on the boulders, the spiral of bones, the music that never should exist. This thing was trying to complete some kind of ancient ritual. And it needed me, or someone like me, to finish it. A living sacrifice. I'm not going to be your victim, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. The shaman's music changed, becoming angrier, more demanding. The blue flames grew higher around us, and I could feel their heat now, even through the unnatural cold. Bandit pressed against my legs, whimpering. I had to get us off this island, but the only way back was across the lake. I glanced at the water and saw it had frozen solid in October, creating a path of ice back to shore. But the ice looked thin and dark in places, ready to crack with one wrong step. "Come on, boy," I whispered to Bandit. "Stay close." I took one step onto the ice, then another. It creaked beneath my weight, but held. Behind us, the shaman's music followed, pushing at my back like an invisible hand. Each note seemed to dig into my mind, making it harder to think, harder to move, and forward instead of turning back. The cold was becoming unbearable. This wasn't normal cold. It felt like it was freezing me from the inside out. My limbs grew heavy, my thoughts foggy. Hypothermia was setting in fast, way faster than it should. I was about halfway across the ice when I heard them again. The voices of my crew, the men I couldn't save. They were so clear now, calling from just beneath the ice. I looked down and almost screamed. Their faces were there, pressed against the underside of the frozen lake, eyes wide and pleading. "You let us die, Daniel," they seemed to say. "Now join us." I stumbled, nearly falling. Bandit barked, the sound snapping me back to reality. These weren't my friends. This was the thing on the island trying to trick me. I thought about all. I had lost my crew, my wife, nearly my will to live. But I still had Bandit. I still had a future, those cabins I wanted to build. And I had my grandfather's wisdom, passed down through generations. The shaman was on the ice now too, floating, just inches above it, still playing that cursed flute. The music was so loud, it seemed to vibrate through the ice beneath my feet, causing small cracks to spread like spider webs. I knew I couldn't outrun it. I had to face it. I turned around, planted my feet as firmly as I could on the slippery surface, and raised the bone whistle to my lips once more. The shaman paused, its empty eye sockets narrowing. I blew into the whistle with everything I had left. No normal sound came out. Instead, a deep, powerful note rang across the frozen lake. It wasn't loud, but it seemed to push against the shaman's music like two waves crashing together. I played the simple melody my grandfather had taught me, a Cherokee protection song passed down for generations. With each note, the shaman's form seemed to waver like a TV with bad reception. The entity screeched, a terrible sound like metal grinding against bone, and lunged toward me. But my music held it back, creating an invisible barrier it couldn't cross. I kept playing, my fingers numb, my lungs burning with the cold. The whistle grew hotter in my hands, almost too hot to hold, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The shaman's blue flames began to dim. The bone flute in its hands started to crack, hairline fractures appearing along its length. A look of what might have been fear crossed its skeletal face. Suddenly, the ice beneath me groaned. I looked down and saw the cracks spreading rapidly, water beginning to seep through. I had to get off the ice, but if I stopped playing, the shaman would overpower me again. I took one careful step backward, then another, still playing the whistle. Bandit whined anxiously beside me. The shaman let out another unearthly screech as more cracks appeared in its flute. It raised its free hand, and a blast of blue flame shot toward me. I ducked, but lost my footing on the slippery ice. As I fell, the whistle slipped from my lips, the protective melody cutting off mid-note. The shaman's music rushed in to fill the silence, stronger than before, triumphant. I hit the ice hard, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. Cracks spread outward from beneath me like a spider web. Water began seeping through, soaking my clothes, the cold so intense it burned. The shaman floated closer, its flute now, aimed directly at me like a weapon. With the last of my strength, I grabbed the whistle again and played one final defiant note. The sound that came out was pure and powerful, cutting through the shaman's melody like a knife. The bone flute in the shaman's hands shattered completely. A look of shock crossed its skeletal face as it began to come apart, pieces of it dissolving into the mist like smoke. But my victory came at a price. The ice beneath me gave way completely, and I plunged into the freezing water. The cold hit me like 1,000 knives. I tried to swim, to find the surface, but my limbs wouldn't respond. The water filled my lungs as I sank deeper. As consciousness began to fade, I saw them, the real faces of my crew, not the twisted versions the shaman had shown me. They were smiling now, reaching for me, welcoming me, and behind them dozens of other souls rising up toward the surface, finally free from their watery prison. My last thought was of Bandit. I hoped he would make it back to shore, that someone would find him and give him a good home. Then darkness took me, and the bone flute song was finally, mercifully silent. My name is Thomas Blackhawk, and I've always known the forest holds secrets. The first time I heard the screams in the pines, I told myself it was just the wind. Up here in the Tongass National Forest of Alaska, the wind plays tricks on you. It whispers, it howls. Sometimes it even sounds like it's calling your name. I've been a park ranger here for almost 5 years now. Before that, I was in the Coast Guard. Before that, well, that's a story for another time. Today, I'm walking beneath trees so tall they make me feel like an ant. Sitka spruce towers 300 feet above me, their branches weaving together like the roof of a church. Sunlight breaks through in thin golden beams that dance when the wind moves the leaves. The air smells of pine sap, wet earth, and the salt from the nearby ocean. Speaking of the ocean, I can hear it right now. The Pacific crashes against the rocks along the coastline, sending up clouds of spray that mix with the forest mist. It creates this ghostly curtain that hangs between the trees closest to the shore. Beautiful, but eerie too. I follow one of the countless bear trails that wind through the underbrush. Devil's Club and salmonberry bushes crowd the path, their leaves still wet with morning dew. These trails aren't made for humans. They're ancient paths worn by generations of bears moving through the green wilderness. But I know them like the lines on my palm. This forest is more than just my workplace. This is the homeland of my Tlingit ancestors. Every step I take, I can feel the connection to those who walked here thousands of years before me. It's not something I can explain easily to outsiders. It's in my blood, in my bones. Storm coming, I say to no one in particular, though my dog Sitka perks up his ears at the sound of my voice. Out over the Gulf of Alaska, dark clouds are gathering. The weather report this morning called for a big one. 3 days of heavy rain and wind that will cut us off from the outside world even more than usual. I don't mind. Sometimes I prefer it that way. I check my satellite phone out of habit, but the signal is already gone. Looking up, I see why. The northern lights are dancing across the sky, which is strange because it's the middle of the day. The aurora borealis usually only shows up at night, but here it is, shimmering curtains of light rippling overhead. Even stranger is the color, not the usual blues and purples, but a sickly green that makes my skin crawl. A Steller's jay lands on a branch near my head and lets out a scream. These birds are always noisy, but something about this call sounds like a warning. Then, in the middle of its cry, it goes completely silent. Not flying away, not finishing its call, just silent like someone hit a mute button. "What's wrong, buddy?" I ask. But the bird just stares at me with beady black eyes before finally fluttering away. That's when the fog rolls in. It comes in, from the ocean like a living thing hugging the ground and swirling around tree trunks. It brings with it the smell of the deep ocean, salt, seaweed, and something else, something dead. The wind shifts suddenly, blowing east instead of west, then north instead of south. It changes direction every few minutes, creating this disorienting pattern of sounds. 1 minute, the trees to my left are rustling. The next, it's the ones behind me, then in front. It makes it impossible to tell which way is which. I look up, again, at those northern lights. That green color isn't natural. I've been watching the aurora my whole life, and I've never seen anything like it. The Weather Service and scientists will probably have some explanation, but out here, alone in the woods, with only Sitka by my side, scientific explanations don't bring much comfort. "Come on, boy," I say to my dog. "Let's get back to the cabin before this storm hits for real." But as we turn to head home, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching us from between the trees, something that's been waiting a very long time. I wasn't always afraid of the water. Funny thing for a Coast Guard rescue swimmer to say, right? But it's true. I used to love the ocean more than anything. My name is Thomas Blackhawk, and I'm 31 years old. 5 years ago, I was pulling people out of stormy seas, saving lives. I saved 43 people during my time in the Coast Guard. 43 faces I'll never forget. But there's one more face that haunts me more than all the others. My partner, Mike. We were out in the worst storm I'd ever seen. Fishing boat, caught in waves taller than buildings. The helicopter couldn't get steady above them. Mike and I went down on the line together. We got 3 fishermen up before a wave slammed into us. The cable snapped. I watched Mike disappear into the black water. They never found his body. I roll up my sleeve and look at the tattoos that cover my arms. Traditional Tlingit designs. Eagles, ravens, salmon. Each one tells a story of my people. My black hair is long now, braided with small wooden beads that my grandmother gave me before she passed. The Coast Guard made me cut it short. Out here, I can be who I really am. "What do you think, Sitka?" I ask my dog as we reach the cabin. Sitka is huge, even for an Alaskan Malamute. His fur is thick and gray with a white mask around his face. His eyes are what really get people, one blue, one brown. Some of the locals say dogs with different colored eyes can see both worlds, the living and the spirit world. I don't know about that, but Sitka definitely sees things I don't. I touch the small leather pouch that hangs around my neck. It was my great-grandfather's, a medicine pouch containing sacred objects for protection. Eagle feather, bear claw, a small carved stone, things that connected him to the spirits. My family gave it to me when I left for the Coast Guard, though they weren't happy about me going. "Abandoning your people," my uncle had said. But he didn't understand. None of them did. How could I explain that I needed to save others to feel whole? Or how the guilt eats at me for not living the traditional way? Inside the cabin, I put a pot of coffee on the stove and look out the window at the darkening sky. This stretch of coastline is my responsibility. Every tide pool, every glacier, every salmon run for 100 miles. I know when the eagles nest and where the bears fish. I can tell you exactly when the salmon will return each year, usually. This year, something's off. The salmon should be fighting their way upstream right now, but the rivers are empty. No, one can explain it. I pour a shot of whiskey into my coffee. I know I drink too much. It's the only way to quiet the dreams, the ones where I'm back in that storm, where I hear Mike calling for help, where I see the faces of drowning people, just out of reach. Sitka whines and paws at the door. "What is it, boy?" He keeps scratching, so I let him out. He doesn't run off, but stands on the porch, his fur standing up along his spine. He's looking at the forest, growling low in his throat. The wind has picked up, bending the tops of the spruce trees. I pull my jacket tighter around me. Tomorrow, I'll check the eastern trails, my last season doing this job. I've already talked to my cousin about joining his fishing crew next spring, back to the sea like my ancestors. Maybe out on the water I can finally make peace with what happened. As night falls, the green lights in the sky grow brighter. I try the satellite phone again, still dead. We're cut off now until the storm passes. Sitka finally comes back inside, but he's restless, pacing from window to window. I don't blame him. Something doesn't feel right. The air is too heavy, like just before lightning strikes. I check my rifle and make sure it's loaded before hanging it back above the door. Not that I expect trouble, but out here, you learn to be prepared. Just a storm coming, I tell Sitka, trying to convince myself as much as him. Just a storm. But deep down, I know better. In this ancient forest, on this wild coastline where my ancestors once fought sea monsters and shape-shifting spirits, storms are never just storms. And as I drift off to sleep, I could swear I hear someone calling my name from the direction of the ocean, a voice that sounds exactly like Mike's. I woke up to Sitka barking, not his normal bark. This was frantic, scared. The cabin was dark except for that weird green light filtering through the windows. My watch said 5:30 a.m., but it looked like midnight outside. "What's wrong, boy?" I grabbed my flashlight and jacket. The storm had arrived overnight. Rain pounded on the roof like someone throwing handfuls of pebbles. The wind howled. No, it screamed through the trees. I'd been through plenty of Alaskan storms before, but something about this one felt wrong. "Come on," I told Sitka, "let's check it out." We stepped onto the porch, and that's when I noticed the silence. Despite the wind and rain, the forest was dead quiet. No birds, no small animals rustling in the underbrush. Nothing. I needed to check the salmon run. It was my job, storm or not. The spawning pools were only a mile away, and I'd walked that path in worse weather. The rain soaked through my jacket within minutes. Sitka stayed close, which wasn't like him. Usually he ran, ahead exploring. Today he pressed against my leg like he was afraid to leave my side. When we reached the stream, I couldn't believe my eyes. Empty. Completely empty. This time of year, the water should be so full of salmon, you could almost walk across their backs. The conditions were perfect, water level, temperature, everything, but there wasn't a single fish. "Where are they, Sitka?" He whined and looked downstream toward the ocean. I followed his gaze but couldn't see far through the curtain. A rain. That's when I heard it. Voices rising and falling with the sound of the waves. They were speaking Tlingit, the language my grandmother used. I only knew a few words, but I recognized the sound. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone there?" No answer, just those whispered words, mixing with the tide. I decided to check the beach. Maybe there was a clue there about the missing salmon. The path down to the shore was slippery with rain, and twice I nearly fell. Sitka kept looking back, like he wanted us to return to the cabin. The beach was a mess of driftwood and kelp thrown up by the rough waves. But as I walked along the shore, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. Whale bones, big ones, arranged in a perfect circle around an old Tlingit village site. I knew this beach well. These bones hadn't been here yesterday. Some were massive, jawbones and ribs bigger than me. It would take several strong men to move them, but there were no footprints in the sand except mine. The smell hit me next, rotting kelp and dead fish so strong it made my eyes water. It overwhelmed the normal forest sense, like something had died and was baking in the sun. Except there was no sun, only storm clouds and that sickly green aurora. I walked along the shore, and that's when I saw it. A fishing boat, not on the water where it belonged, but hanging 20 feet up in a spruce tree. It was wedged between two massive branches, its hull cracked open like an egg. No storm surge could lift a boat that high. It was impossible. My GPS beeped, and I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen flickered, showing my location both on land and 2 miles out to sea at the same time. I shook it, turned it off and on again. but the reading didn't change. "Let's get out of here," I told Sitka. As we turned to leave, I noticed footprints in the wet sand that definitely weren't human. They looked almost like a person's, but with webbed toes, and were those claw marks? I followed them with my eyes. They led straight into the ocean. The storm was getting worse. The wind created weird patterns in the fog, making solid ground. Looked like it was moving like water. I needed to get back to the cabin and radio for help, though I wasn't sure the radio would work any better than my phone or GPS. We hurried back up the path. When we passed a series of tide pools, something made me stop and look down. For just a second, I thought I saw faces reflected in the water, pale, wide-eyed faces staring up at me. I blinked, and they were gone. "I'm losing it," I muttered. "To myself," Sitka growled, his eyes fixed on one particular pool. I knelt down to look, but all I saw was my own reflection in the dark water. Then my reflection smiled at me, even though I wasn't smiling. I jumped back, heart pounding. Sitka barked and pulled at my jacket, urging me away from the water. By the time we made it back to the cabin, I was soaked and shivering, but not just from the cold. I'd spent my whole life in these woods. I knew every inch of this coastline, but today, for the first time, I felt like a stranger here. Like the land itself had changed overnight into something I no longer recognized. I tried the radio, nothing but static. Through the hiss and pop, I thought I heard a voice, Mike's voice, saying my name over and over. "Thomas, Thomas, help me, Thomas." I threw the radio across the room. Something was very wrong in my forest, and I had a terrible feeling it was only going to get worse. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The storm raged outside, the wind screaming through the trees like a living thing in pain. Sitka paced the cabin, stopping sometimes to stare at the door and growl. Around midnight, the rain stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I stepped onto the porch with my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the clearing. The wet trees reflected the light back at me, but beyond them was pure darkness. "Hello!" I called, not really expecting an answer. The air felt heavy, like being underwater. That's when I noticed the tide pools near my cabin were overflowing, the water creeping up the slope toward the porch. But that was impossible. We were a good 50 feet above the high tide mark. I walked down to investigate, Sitka reluctantly following. The nearest pool was larger than I remembered, its surface black and still despite the wind. I pointed my flashlight at it, and the beam seemed to be swallowed up, not reflecting at all. Then the water moved. Not ripples or waves, it bulged upward in the center, rising like something was pushing from below. I took a step back, but I couldn't look. Away, a hand broke the surface. Pale webbed fingers splayed wide. Then an arm covered in what looked like wet fur or seaweed. Then a head emerged. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened like someone was squeezing my lungs. Though I stood on dry land, I felt like I was drowning. The creature pulled itself fully from the pool, 7 feet tall at least, standing on 2 legs, but not quite human. Its body was muscular, covered in sleek dark fur that glistened with water. Where a person would have hands and feet, it had webbed claws. Its face was the worst part, almost like an otter's, but with human-like eyes that reflected green in my flashlight beam. I knew what it was without being told. Kushtaka, the sea otter spirit from Tlingit legends, the stealer of souls. "Thomas," it said, and its voice was Mike's voice, exactly as I remembered it. "Why did you let me drown, Thomas?" I stumbled backward, nearly falling. "You're not real," I whispered. It tilted its head, water dripping from its fur. "I'm as real as the guilt you carry." Sitka lunged forward, teeth bared, breaking the spell. I reached for him, but he was already charging the creature. "Sitka, no!" The Kushtaka made a sound like wails, singing mixed with human screams. It was the same sound I'd been hearing in the pines. Sitka skidded to a stop, whimpering but still, growling. I reached for the knife on my belt. my great-grandfather's bone knife with carvings along the handle. The creature hissed at the sight of it. "Stay back," I warned, though my voice shook. The Kushtaka smiled, showing pointed teeth. "The ocean always claims what belongs to it, Thomas Blackhawk. You escaped once, you won't again." It stepped toward me and I raised my gun. When had I grabbed my gun? And fired. The bullet hit it square in the chest, but the creature didn't flinch. Where the bullet entered, its body simply flowed like water closing over the wound. The metal of my gun suddenly felt hot. I looked down and watched in horror as rust spread across it like fast-growing mold. Within seconds, the gun was a crumbling piece of corroded metal in my hands. The Kushtaka laughed, Mike's laugh. "Iron has no power here, son of the Tlingit." It moved like water, flowing rather than walking, covering the distance between us. In seconds, I slashed with my knife, and this time the creature recoiled. The bone blade left a smoking gash in its arm that didn't heal. Taking advantage of its pain, I grabbed Sitka's collar and ran. Behind us, the Kushtaka's scream rose above the wind, promising revenge. Back in the cabin, I slammed the door and pushed furniture against it. My hands shook as I tried to light the lantern. Outside, something heavy slammed against the walls, making the whole structure creak. "Thomas!" Mike's voice called from outside. Every window, one after another. "Let me in, Thomas, I'm so cold. The water is so cold." Then other voices joined in. My mother, my grandfather, friends from the Coast Guard. All of them begging to be let in, saying they were drowning and only I could save them. Sitka pressed against my leg, his fur standing on end. I noticed his eyes. They seemed to glow slightly in the dim light, both fixed on the same spot near the window where I saw nothing. The storm picked up again, rain hammering the roof. Water began seeping under the door, but it wasn't normal rainwater. It was seawater, complete with small bits of kelp and the smell of the deep ocean. "What does it want?" I whispered, more to myself than to Sitka. The dog whined and pawed. At my great-grandfather's medicine pouch around my neck. The leather felt warm against my skin, almost hot. Outside, the voices changed to that terrible whale song scream. The green light of the aurora shone through the windows, casting everything. In a sickly glow, I knew the legends of the Kushtaka. It lured people to the water by mimicking the voices of loved ones, then drowned them and stole their souls. But why come after me now, after all these years? As if in answer to my unspoken question, Mike's voice came again, softer this time, right beside my ear, though no one was there. "Because you left me in the water, Thomas. Now it's your turn." The water was ankle-deep now, still rising. The cabin creaked and groaned under the assault of wind and rain. I clutched my knife in one hand and the medicine pouch in the other, trying to remember the prayers my grandfather had taught me long ago. Outside, something massive moved past the windows. I caught glimpses of wet fur, of clawed hands, of eyes that glowed like the northern lights. The Kushtaka was circling the cabin, hunting me. And as the water continued to rise around my feet, I realized with growing horror that it was bringing the ocean to me. Dawn came, but you wouldn't know it. The sky stayed dark, that green light still pulsing overhead. Water filled the cabin now, up to my knees. The furniture floated. Sitka swam in circles, whining. I was trapped. The Kushtaka had brought the ocean right to my doorstep, and it was only a matter of time before the water rose high enough to drown me. Just like Mike. That's when I realized this wasn't about me leaving the Coast Guard or coming back to my ancestral land. This was about Mike, about the guilt I carried for surviving when he didn't. The Kushtaka fed on that guilt. It used it to find me, to call to me. "I know what you're doing," I shouted at the walls. "I know what you want." In response, the cabin shook as something massive slammed against it. Wood splintered, a window cracked. I had to get out, find higher ground. But that's exactly what it wanted, to drive me outside where it could take me. My fingers touched the medicine pouch again. Inside were sacred objects, things my great-grandfather had used to connect with the spirit world, to fight spirits. I opened the pouch with shaking hands. Inside was an eagle feather, a bear claw, and a small stone carving of a killer whale. There was also a folded piece of paper, water-stained but still readable. My grandfather's handwriting, a prayer in Tlingit, with English translation below. "The tide rises, the tide falls," I read aloud, my voice steadying as I spoke the words. "I stand at the meeting place of worlds." Outside, the wailing stopped. The cabin grew quiet, except for the lapping of water. My feet are on the land of my ancestors. My spirit is sheltered by their strength. The water around my legs began to recede, just a little. I call on the raven who brought light to the world. I call on the eagle who soars between realms. Sitka stopped swimming and stood on a floating chair, his ears perked forward. His eyes, both now strangely glowing white, fixed on something I couldn't see. "By the blood of my people, by the bones of the earth, I reject your claim on my soul." A scream came from outside, not Mike's voice now, but something ancient and furious. The walls shook again. This time, a whole section of the wall caved in, letting in a rush of seawater and debris. And with it came the Kushtaka. It was bigger, now its fur darker, its eyes glowing green like the sky. It flowed into the cabin like a wave, reforming into its shape once inside. "You cannot escape the sea," it hissed, its voice no longer human. "All rivers return to the ocean. All souls return to the depths." The knife in my hand felt warm. The symbols carved into the bone handle glowed faintly, the same white as Sitka's eyes. "Maybe," I said, "but not today." I lunged forward, slashing with the knife. The Kushtaka was fast, flowing like water around the blade. Its claws caught my arm, tearing through my jacket and into skin. The pain was like ice burning. I fell back, blood mixing with the seawater. The creature advanced, growing taller, its shadow filling the broken cabin. "Your ancestors knew to respect the ocean," it said. "They made offerings to me. They honored me. What have you given, Thomas Blackhawk?" "I gave everything," I shouted. 43 lives saved. My partner lost. My peace of mind gone. What more do you want?" "Your soul," it whispered, reaching for me. Sitka attacked from the side, teeth sinking into the creature's arm. The Kushtaka howled, trying to shake him off, but my dog held on, growling through his clenched jaw. I used the distraction to grab the killer whale carving from the pouch. It was small but heavy, made from some dark stone. I clutched it tight in my fist alongside the knife. "My great-grandfather fought you before," I said, remembering stories I'd been told as a child, stories I'd thought were just legends. "He sent you back to the deep. I will too." The Kushtaka threw Sitka off. My dog hit the wall with a yelp, but immediately got back up, placing himself between me and the creature. I noticed something then. The tide was turning. I could feel it in the water around my legs, in the pull of the current. The king tide was peaking, the highest point where land and sea meet, the moment of greatest power for the Kushtaka, but also its greatest vulnerability. This had to end at the sacred transformation site, the place where, according to Tlingit stories, humans could become animals and spirits could become flesh. It was a tidal cave, less than a mile down the beach. I had to get there before the tide turned. "Sitka, come!" I called, then dove through the broken wall into the storm outside. The world had transformed. The forest was half submerged, water flowing between trees where dry land should be. The beach was gone, waves crashing against the tree line. And the sky, that unnatural green, continued to pulse and swirl. I ran, splashing through water that shouldn't be there, Sitka at my heels. Behind us came that terrible whale song scream. The Kushtaka was following. My lungs burned. The cold was seeping into my bones, but I kept going, clutching the knife and stone carving, mentally tracing the path to the sacred cave. The creature was gaining. I could hear it moving through the water behind me, fast as a current. Twice I felt claws grab at my jacket, and twice I slashed backward with the knife, buying myself seconds. Finally I saw it. The rock formation that marked the entrance to the cave. At normal tides it was accessible by land. During the highest tides it filled with seawater, connecting to the ocean. I splashed toward it, fighting against waves that pushed me back. The cave mouth was almost completely underwater now, just a small gap of air at the top. "Thomas!" Mike's voice called behind me. "Don't leave me again, Thomas!" I hesitated, just for a second. That was all it took. Cold. Hands grabbed my ankle, pulling me under. I thrashed, trying to break free, but the Kushtaka was too strong. Water closed over my head. Under the surface, I could see it clearly. The creature's true form, more terrifying than what it showed above. Its face shifted between otter, human, and something much older, something that didn't have a name. My lungs screamed for air. The knife slipped from my numbing fingers. Only the stone carving remained, clutched in my fist. This was it. This was how I would die, just like Mike. No, not like Mike. Mike didn't have a choice. I did. With the last of my strength, I pressed the killer whale carving against the creature's chest, right where a heart would be in a human. I spoke the final words of my grandfather's prayer into the water, the bubbles of my voice rising around us. The Kushtaka's eyes widened. It released me, clawing at the stone now stuck to its chest like it was burning. I kicked to the surface, gasping for air. Sitka was there, pulling at my collar, helping me toward the small strip of beach inside the cave that remained above water. Behind us, the water churned and boiled. The Kushtaka breached the surface, thrashing, the stone carving glowing white-hot against its chest. It screamed, not in Mike's voice now, but in its own ancient, inhuman voice. "You are bound," I gasped, remembering the words from childhood stories. Bound by the keeper of the deep, bound by the traveler between worlds. The creature writhed, its form melting, reshaping, trying to escape the burning stone. But it couldn't. The magic of my ancestors, magic I had never fully believed in until now, held it fast. "Go back to the depths," I commanded, standing on shaking legs. "Leave this place. Leave me in peace." The Kushtaka's screams grew higher, shriller, until they matched exactly the sound I'd been hearing in the pines for days. Then, with a final wail that shook loose stones from the cave ceiling, it collapsed into the water, not flowing this time, but falling like any solid thing. It sank beneath the dark surface, the glow of the stone carving visible for several seconds before it too vanished into the deep. Then silence. The water stilled. Outside, the rain stopped. Sitka pressed against my leg, whining softly. I looked down at him and gasped. His eyes, once blue and brown, were now completely white, glowing faintly in the dim cave. "Sitka," I whispered. He wagged his tail, still the same dog despite his changed eyes. But I knew he would never be quite the same again. Neither of us would. I limped out of the cave, leaning on Sitka for support. Outside, the storm had broken. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the clouds. The water that had flooded the forest was receding, flowing back to the sea where it belonged. The green aurora was gone, replaced by normal blue sky. But as I looked out over the tide pools, I saw small lights dancing just above the water's surface. Tiny green flickers like the northern lights in miniature. A warning, perhaps, a reminder that the Kushtaka wasn't gone forever, just banished for now. I touched the empty medicine pouch around my neck. I had lost the sacred objects it contained, but somehow I felt their protection remained. My ancestors had fought this battle before. Now I had joined their ranks. As Sitka and I made our way back toward what remained of my cabin, I realized something important. I wouldn't be leaving the forest to become a fisherman. Not now. This was where I belonged, standing guard between the modern world and the ancient dangers that still lurked in the wild places. The screaming pines were quiet now, but I knew better than to think the silence would last forever. And when the screams came again, I would be ready. My name is Thomas Kane. I've been a park ranger in these Appalachian mountains for 8 years now, and I still can't shake the feeling that the mountains are watching me back. That October morning started like many others. The sun was just coming, up, painting the sky pink above the misty mountain ridges. The ancient hemlock trees cast long shadows across the trail as I made my first rounds of the day. The creek bubbled nearby, and mourning doves called to each other in the branches above. It should have felt peaceful. It usually did. That's why I came to these mountains after the war, to find some peace. I took a deep breath of the crisp morning air, feeling the cool bite of fall in my lungs. The temperature was perfect, about 55 degrees, but something raised goosebumps on my arms. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Out here, I was completely cut off from the world. No cell towers for 50 miles in any direction. Just me, my CB radio, and the wilderness. Most days, that's exactly how I liked it. I stopped when I spotted a black bear cub waddling across the trail ahead of me. It sniffed the air curiously before disappearing into a thicket of mountain laurel. I smiled, a rare thing for me these days. But then the fog started rolling in from the valley below, thicker than usual, turning the familiar trees and rocks into strange, ghostly shapes. The old mining road beneath my boots showed deep ruts from the coal trucks that used to rumble through here decades ago, back when the mountain still gave up its black gold. I was about to continue my hike when I noticed something odd. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds calling, no squirrels chattering, not even the buzz of insects. Nothing, just a heavy, unnatural silence, as if every living creature had suddenly stopped breathing all at once. That's when I knew something was wrong, very wrong. In my 8 years in these mountains, I had never heard such perfect, complete silence. Nature is never silent. I reached for my radio to call Jake, the young ranger who had started working with me last month. My hand was steadier than it should have been, maybe because part of me already knew that whatever waited in these mountains was something I'd been preparing for my whole life. I should tell you a bit about myself. I'm 41 years old, and before I became a park ranger, I was a soldier in Vietnam. That war changed me. I lost my whole squad in an ambush, and those memories still haunt me. Sometimes at night, I still hear the screams. My left hand shakes a little from old wounds. Tiny bits of metal are still stuck in there from a grenade that went off too close. But my right hand stays steady, which is good for when I need to use my gun, though I hope I never won't have to. I pulled out my wallet and looked at the faded photo of Maria, my wife. She died in a car crash while I was overseas. Sometimes I wonder if I could have saved her if I'd been home instead of fighting in a jungle on the other side of the world. Kane! Hey, Kane! Jake's voice broke through my thoughts. He was jogging up the trail, his ranger hat bouncing on his back, held by its chin strap. Jake Morrison is just 19, full of energy and excited about everything. He reminds me of how I used to be before the war, before Maria. His face was flushed from running, and he was grinning like he'd discovered buried treasure. "You won't believe what I found over by Copper Creek," he said, catching his breath. I smiled a little. "Probably another deer track you think is Bigfoot. Very funny. No, it's an old campsite. Looks abandoned, but not for long. Maybe those hikers that were reported missing last week?" I nodded, suddenly serious. "Show me." As we walked, I pulled my father's antique compass from my pocket. It's been passed down through 3 generations in my family. The brass case is scratched and dented, but it still works perfectly, usually. "How do you know so much about these mountains?" Jake asked, ducking under a low-hanging branch. 8 years of walking every trail, every season, I said. You learn to read the forest, every animal sound, every change in the weather. When something's not right, you feel it. Like what? I stopped walking. Like now, listen. Jake froze. I don't hear anything. Exactly, I said. Nothing. No birds, no insects, nothing. Jake's eager smile faded. He finally noticed what I'd felt earlier, the unnatural silence pressing in around us. Is that normal? He whispered. I shook my head slowly. No, it's not. Jake looked nervous now, his eyes darting between the trees. What do you think it means? I didn't answer. Right away, my instincts from the war were kicking in, that sixth sense that tells you when danger is near. I'd learned to trust that feeling. It had saved my life more than once in Vietnam. I don't know, I finally said, but I intend to find out. Let's see that campsite. As we continued walking, I kept my hand close to the revolver on my hip. The silence followed us, thick and heavy like the fog. For the first time in years, the mountains didn't feel like home anymore. They felt like enemy territory. Jake led me off the main trail and through a thick patch of trees. The fog made it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead. I kept one eye on the compass, though something felt off about it today. We came to a large oak tree that made me stop in my tracks. Deep claw marks ran up the trunk, at least 12 feet high. They weren't bear claws. I know bear marks. These were different. Jake, I said quietly, pointing to the tree. His eyes went wide. What could make marks like that? Nothing I've ever seen, I admitted. As we stood there, I caught a smell in the air that turned my stomach. Like rotting meat mixed with wet dog, but worse somehow. Much worse. You smell that? I asked. Jake nodded, pulling his shirt collar up over his nose. What is it? Let's keep moving, I said instead of answering. Truth was, I didn't know, and that worried me. The CB radio on my belt crackled suddenly, making us both jump. Through the static, I heard what sounded like whispering. Not English, not any language I recognized, just strange, hissing sounds that made the hair on my neck stand up. Radio's acting up, I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. I switched it off. We walked a bit further when Jake pointed to the ground. Look at these tracks. I knelt down to examine them. They were pressed into the mud, clearly fresh. They looked almost human, but the feet were too long, nearly 2 feet in length, with what appeared to be claw marks at the ends of the toes. Someone playing a joke? Jake suggested, but his voice shook a little. I shook my head. These are real tracks, made by something heavy. The campsite appeared through the fog as we rounded a bend. 2 canvas tents were in tatters, like something had burst out from inside them. Sleeping bags and backpacks were scattered around, some torn open with their contents spilled out. This is worse than I thought, Jake whispered. I picked up a flashlight from the ground and clicked it on. Nothing happened. I opened it up. The batteries were brand new. That's weird, I said, putting in fresh batteries from my pack. The light flickered weakly, then died again. A deep howl echoed off the mountains, making both of us freeze. It wasn't a wolf. I know wolf howls. This was deeper, wilder, like nothing I'd ever heard before. Jake grabbed my arm. What was that? Before I could answer, my compass started spinning wildly, the needle whirling around as if it couldn't find north. I'd never seen anything like it. We need to radio for backup, Jake said, his voice higher than usual. I was about to agree when I spotted something in the trees that made my blood run cold. About 20 feet up, hanging from a branch, was a deer carcass. It looked completely drained of blood, its eyes open and glassy. Kane, Jake whispered, I think we should go, now. I nodded slowly, unable to take my eyes off the deer. Yeah, let's head back to the station and call this in. As we turned to leave, the shadows between the trees seemed to shift and move, though there was no wind. My mind flashed back to the jungle in Vietnam, where the enemy would hide in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now. Whatever was out there in the fog, I was certain of one thing. It was watching us, and it was following. We moved quickly back toward the main trail, the fog growing thicker with each step. Jake kept looking over his shoulder, and I couldn't blame him. I felt it too. Something was following us. "What do you think did that to the campsite?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not sure," I said. "Could be a bear, maybe." But I didn't believe that. Bears don't hang deer in trees. They don't make tracks like the ones we saw. And they certainly don't make howls that sound like that. A shadow moved between the distant trees, something big. I stopped and held out my arm to halt Jake. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Jake nodded, his face pale. What was it? I squinted into the fog. For a moment there was nothing. Then I saw two yellow eyes glowing in the mist, watching us. They were set too high off the ground to be any normal animal. Whatever it was stood at least 7 feet tall. "Don't move," I said quietly. The thing stepped forward, just enough for us to make out its shape. It walked on 2 legs like a man, but its body was covered in dark fur. Its face was a nightmare mix of human and wolf, a long snout filled with sharp teeth, but with eyes that looked almost human, intelligent, hungry. "Cain!" Jake's voice cracked. That's not possible." My mind raced to make sense of what I was seeing. A wolf that walks like a man? A werewolf? Those were just stories. This had to be some kind of bear with a disease, or a mountain lion, seen through the fog, playing tricks on our eyes. But deep down I knew better. The creature tilted its head, studying us. Then it spoke. "Thomas." My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't the fact that this thing could speak that shocked me most. It was the voice it used. Maria's voice. My dead wife's voice, perfectly copied, calling my name with the same gentle tone she used to use. "Thomas, I've missed you." Jake grabbed my arm. "Cain, what is it doing? How does it know your name?" Images flashed in my mind. Horrible visions. Of people being torn apart. Of blood on snow, of eyes staring lifelessly into the night sky. Somehow, I knew these were the creature's previous victims, and it was showing me these images on purpose. The creature moved with incredible speed, disappearing from where it stood and reappearing behind us. We spun around, and I drew my revolver. "Run!" I shouted to Jake. "Head for the creek!" I fired 2 shots at the creature. The bullets seemed to pass right through it, like shooting at smoke. It made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl, and lunged forward. We ran. Branches whipped at our faces as we crashed through the underbrush. I could hear it behind us, moving fast, but strangely quiet for something so large. "Maria is waiting for you, Thomas," the voice called from the trees to our left. Then it was behind us again. "Why did you leave me alone, Thomas?" The voice brought back memories of Vietnam, the ambush, my men screaming, the smell of blood and gunpowder. My head swam with the images, making it hard to focus on running. We stumbled onto a narrow trail that led upward. Around us, the trees seemed to bend inward, blocking other paths, forcing us to go the way the creature wanted. Jake pointed ahead. "Look!" Carved into a rock beside the trail were strange symbols that seemed to glow with a faint blue light. They looked old, maybe Cherokee markings from long ago. "What are those?" Jake gasped as we ran past. "No idea," I panted. "Keep moving, we need to reach water." "Why water?" "Just a feeling," I said, though it was more than that. An old memory from my childhood. My grandfather telling stories about mountain devils that couldn't cross running. Water. The howl came again, closer this time, and with it a terrible certainty that we were being herded. This thing was driving us exactly where it wanted us to go. The trail grew steeper as we climbed. My breath came in short gasps, and Jake was starting to fall behind. "Come on!" I shouted back to him. "We need to keep moving." "I can't," he panted. "It's too fast, Kane. We can't outrun it." He was right. The creature was toying with us, letting us run until we were tired, herding us like sheep. I could hear rushing water ahead, a waterfall or rapids. The path suddenly opened onto a narrow ledge. To our right was the mountain wall. To our left, a sheer drop of at least 100 feet onto jagged rocks below. Ahead, maybe 50 yards. Away, I could see a waterfall cascading down the mountainside. "We need to reach that water," I said, pointing. Jake looked at the narrow ledge with fear in his eyes. "I don't think I can, Kane. I'm afraid of heights." "You can do this," I said firmly. "One step at a time. Don't look down." We inched forward along the ledge. The drop to our left seemed to grow deeper with each step. The roar of the waterfall grew louder. That's when we heard it again, that terrible howl now directly behind us. We turned to see the creature at the entrance to the ledge, blocking our way back. "Kane!" Jake's voice trembled. "What do we do?" "Keep moving toward the water," I said, my hand on my useless revolver. "Don't run, just walk." The creature stalked toward us, yellow eyes gleaming. It was even more terrifying in the open. Massive, shoulders covered in dark fur, clawed hands that looked strong enough to tear through steel. "Thomas," it called in Maria's voice, "don't you want to be with me again?" "That's not Maria," I growled, more to myself than to Jake. Jake's panic finally broke. "I can't do this," he shouted, and tried to push past me to run. "Jake, no!" I grabbed for him, but it was too late. He bolted forward, and the creature moved with that impossible speed. One moment it was 20 feet away, the next it was right behind Jake. Its claws tore through his jacket and into his back. Jake screamed, a sound I'll never forget, and the force of the attack sent him stumbling sideways. I watched in horror as he lost his balance and fell over the edge of the cliff. His scream faded as he plummeted to the rocks below. "No!" I yelled, dropping to my knees at the edge, knowing it was too late. Jake was gone. Rage and guilt flooded through me. Another person dead because I couldn't save them, just like my squad in Vietnam, just like Maria. The creature stood watching me, its head tilted to one side. "You led us here," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You wanted this." It made that not quite laughing sound again, and I felt the hatred rise in me like a fire. I pulled out my father's compass, clutching it so hard the edges dug into my palm. The needle was still spinning wildly. Something about the compass seemed to interest the creature, its eyes fixed on it, and it took a step back. An old memory surfaced, my grandfather telling me how the compass needle was made of pure silver, blessed by a mountain preacher when my great-grandfather first settled in these hills. "Silver," I whispered. The old stories about werewolves. Being vulnerable to silver, could there be truth to them? The creature snarled and lunged at me. I rolled to the side, feeling its claws graze my shoulder. Pain shot through me, but I kept moving, scrambling toward the waterfall. I reached the edge of the rushing water just as the creature pounced again. This time, I didn't try to dodge. I turned and braced myself, holding the compass out in front of me. The creature slammed into me with incredible force, driving me back into the cold spray of the waterfall. As the water hit us both, I felt the creature's strength falter for just an instant, long enough for me to act. With all my strength, I broke open the compass case and ripped out the silver needle. The creature's eyes widened with what looked like fear for the first time. "This is for Jake," I said, and drove the silver needle straight into the creature's chest. An inhuman scream tore from its throat, not Maria's voice now, but something ancient and terrible. It thrashed and clawed at me, ripping through my jacket and skin. The pain was blinding, but I held on, pushing the silver deeper. The creature's body began to change, shifting between human and wolf forms as if it couldn't hold its shape. In its eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected: relief. Then it spoke one last time, not in Maria's voice, but in a deep, rumbling growl. "The curse is yours now." A flash of blue light erupted from where the silver pierced its heart. I felt a burning sensation spread up my arm and through my chest, like liquid fire in my veins. The creature's body dissolved into a dark mist that seemed to flow into me, through my skin, my eyes, my mouth. I tried to scream, but couldn't. Then everything went black. I woke up 3 days later in the ranger station medical room. My body was covered in bandages, and every muscle ached like I'd been hit by a truck. "He's awake," someone called, and soon the room was filled with other rangers and a doctor. They told me search and rescue had found me unconscious by the waterfall, badly injured. They'd also found Jake's body at the bottom of the cliff. The official report said he'd slipped and fallen while we were investigating an illegal campsite. No one mentioned a creature. No one asked about the strange claw marks on my chest that wouldn't heal properly. They just said I was lucky to be alive. I nodded and agreed with their version of events. What else could I say? That we'd been attacked by a werewolf? That it had spoken with my dead wife's voice? They'd think I was crazy from grief or trauma. But I knew what had happened was real. I could feel it inside me. Something new, something dark, something waiting. The first full moon came 2 weeks later. I was back in my cabin, still on medical leave. As the moonlight streamed through my window, the burning sensation returned, spreading through my body like wildfire. My hands changed first, fingers lengthening, nails hardening into claws. The pain was unbearable as bones broke and reformed, as fur pushed through my skin. I tried to scream, but my voice changed to a howl halfway through. "The curse is yours now," the creature had said. Now I understood. When the transformation was complete, I looked in the mirror and saw yellow eyes staring back at me, the same eyes that had watched us from the fog. But something was different. I still had my mind, my thoughts. I was still Thomas Kane, but also something else now. The hunger was there, a terrible hunger for flesh and fear, but I could control it. Barely, but I could. I ran into the forest that night, far from any hikers or campers. I hunted deer to satisfy the hunger, fighting the urge to seek out humans instead. When morning came, I changed back, exhausted and confused, but human again. Over the next months, I requested transfer to the most remote areas of the park. The other rangers thought I was suffering from PTSD after Jake's death. In a way, they were right. I learned more about the creature I had killed and become. Old Cherokee legends spoke of a forest spirit that punished those who harmed the mountains. Local stories mentioned a devil's backbone, where hikers disappeared during full moons. The pattern became clear. The creature chose victims who were already suffering from guilt and trauma. It fed on their pain before feeding on their flesh. For generations, it had haunted these mountains, passing its curse to whoever managed to defeat it. Now that curse was mine. I stay in these mountains because I must. During normal days, I'm still a park ranger, protecting people from the dangers of the wilderness. But during full moons, I become the very thing they need protection from. I've found ways to control it better over time. I chain myself in a cave I've found deep in the mountains. I hunt animals, not people. I fight the hunger every month. But sometimes, when the moon is especially bright and the hunger is too strong, I feel the chains starting to break. And I wonder how long I can hold on before I become exactly like the creature that killed Jake. The Park Service still can't explain why hikers occasionally go missing in these remote parts, though they always seem to be troubled souls. Veterans with PTSD like me, people running from guilt or grief. If you ever find yourself hiking in these Appalachian mountains and you feel that unnatural silence fall around you or see yellow eyes watching from between the trees, run. Find running water. Don't look back. And whatever you do, stay away from the devil's backbone during the full moon, because I might be out there, and I might not be strong enough to fight what I've become. My name is Thomas Kane. I was a soldier. I was a park ranger. Now I am something else. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I've seen things in these woods that no one would believe. The winter of 1971 hit the Superior National Forest harder than most. I remember that day in December when everything changed. The sky hung low and grey, like a ceiling of pewter pressing down on the endless stretch of pine and birch trees that reach all the way to the Canadian border. I love this forest, even when it's trying to kill you. There's an honesty to winter's cruelty that I find comforting. Each breath I took felt like swallowing tiny shards of glass, the air so cold it seemed to freeze my lungs. The snow crunched beneath my boots, each step breaking the strange silence that had fallen over the woods. In the distance, wolves howled. Their voices carried across the frozen landscape, full of a loneliness I understood too well. Ghost, my husky, perked his ears up at the sound but didn't seem worried. He trotted beside me, his white fur blending with the snow. "Storm's coming," I muttered to Ghost, looking northwest where dark clouds were building. The weather report on my ham radio this morning had warned about a blizzard, the kind that traps people and swallows them whole. The radio had been cutting in and out all day, static mixing with voices, as if the very air was fighting against communication. I stopped to catch my breath near a dead pine. A raven sat perched on a broken branch, watching me with eyes too smart for comfort. Something about the way it tilted its head made my skin crawl. Ghost growled softly, which wasn't like him. "What is it, boy?" I asked, but he just stared at the bird. The wind suddenly picked up, driving snow sideways and erasing our tracks within minutes. I pulled my scarf tighter around my face. Daylight was already fading, though it was only mid-afternoon. That's winter in northern Minnesota for you. Darkness comes early and brings its friends. Between gusts of wind, a strange silence fell over the forest. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, as if the entire wilderness was holding its breath, waiting for something. I didn't know it then, but the forest had good reason to be afraid. I wasn't always a park ranger. Before moving to this wilderness, I taught people how to survive in the Arctic. I was good at my job until 3 years ago, when I lost a student named Sarah Chen to the cold. Hypothermia is a quiet killer. By the time I realized Sarah had wandered off from our group, it was too late. I found her sitting against a tree, a peaceful look on her face, like she'd just decided to take a nap. That's how hypothermia tricks you. Makes you feel warm and sleepy right before it takes your life. I still carry Sarah's St. Jude pendant with me everywhere. St. Jude is the patron saint of lost causes. Sometimes I hold it tight in my palm when the memories get too loud. Ghost nudged my hand with his cold nose, bringing me back to the present. He's not just any husky. He survived 2 weeks alone in an Alaskan blizzard before I found him. The vet said it should have been impossible, but Ghost has always been special that way. Cold doesn't seem to bother him like it does other dogs or people. We should head back to the station, I told him, checking my watch. The divorce papers had arrived last week. Tom left me for my younger sister, of all people. 5 years of marriage ended with a signature and a strange emptiness I couldn't name. Maybe that's why I requested this remote posting, to get as far away from them as possible. Ghost suddenly stopped, his ears pricked forward. He let out a low whine that made the hair on my arms stand up. "What is it, boy?" I asked, scanning. The trees ahead. The blizzard was closing in, faster than I expected. Already I could barely see 20 feet in front of me. I should have turned back right then. Any sensible ranger would have. But that's my problem. When something feels wrong, I go toward it instead of away. It's the same instinct that made me dive into a half-frozen lake after Sarah, the same one, that kept me searching long after others gave up. My boss says I take unnecessary risks. He's probably right. Last month, I tracked a lost hiker for 2 days without sleep, pushing myself until I collapsed. The doctor said, I was lucky to avoid frostbite. I'd been thinking about quitting, maybe taking that teaching job at the community college. Normal hours, warm classrooms, students who wouldn't die if I made a mistake. But not today. Today, something was calling me deeper into the forest. "Come on, Ghost," I said, pulling my compass from my pocket. "Let's check it out, then head home." As we pushed forward, the wind whispered through the trees, almost like voices. And maybe it was just my imagination, but they seemed to be saying my name. The old hunting cabin appeared through the swirling snow like a ghost. It shouldn't have been occupied this time of year. Hunting season was over and no permits had been issued for winter camping in this sector. "Hello, Park Ranger," I called out, but only the wind answered. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind. Ghost refused to go in, which wasn't like him at all. "Stay then," I told him, drawing my flashlight. "Guard." Inside, the cabin was a mess. Not the normal kind of mess campers leave, candy wrappers or forgotten socks. This was different. Everything useful had been taken. Food supplies, emergency, blankets. Even the first aid kit was gone. But what made my blood run cold were the scratches on the walls. Deep grooves that looked like they'd been made by claws from the inside, as if something had been trying to get out. I backed away, nearly tripping over the threshold. Ghost was pacing nervously, his breath making small clouds in the freezing air. That's when I noticed the silence. The forest had gone completely quiet. No birds, no rustling branches. Even the wind had stopped howling through the trees. The only sound was the soft crunch of snow beneath Ghost's paws. "Let's keep moving," I whispered, though I'm not sure why I felt the need to be quiet. About half a mile from the cabin, we found it. A moose carcass, half buried in snow. Dead animals aren't unusual in winter, but this was different. The moose had been eaten, but not by wolves or bears. The bite marks on the exposed bones were too big, almost human-like. The smell hit me then, a horrible mix of rotten meat and something else, something that reminded me of striking a match. Ghost whined and backed away. "I don't like it either." "Buddy," I said, covering my nose with my scarf. That's when I noticed the tracks. Someone had approached the cabin on snowshoes. Normal enough. But leaving the cabin, the tracks changed. The snowshoes were gone, and instead there were bare human footprints in the snow. Bare feet, in negative 20-degree weather. I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Sullivan. I'm at grid reference Mike 7. Found an abandoned cabin with signs of disturbance and unusual tracks. Over." The radio crackled with static. Then a voice came through, so faint I could barely hear it. But it wasn't Bill from the ranger station. It was whispering, in words I couldn't understand. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I quickly turned it off. In the distance, I thought I heard children crying. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the old mining camp, a place that had been abandoned for at least 30 years. "Did you hear that?" I asked Ghost. His ears were flat against his head now, his tail tucked between his legs. I looked, down at the footprints again, following their path with my eyes. They started as normal human tracks, then gradually changed, the toes spreading wider, the heel narrowing, until they looked like something else entirely. The blizzard hit us, full force then, creating a whiteout. I could barely see Ghost right beside me. Without landmarks, I'd be lost in minutes. I turned to head back, using my compass to guide me. But something wasn't right. The trail markers I'd passed earlier had been moved. Instead of pointing toward the ranger station, they now led deeper into the forest, into territory that wasn't on any of my maps. Ghost barked urgently. He wanted to leave, now. For once, I didn't argue with him. The snow was falling so thick now that it was like walking through a white wall. My compass needle spun wildly, useless. Ghost stayed close to my legs, which wasn't like him at all. He usually ranged ahead, scouting the path. "It's okay, boy," I said, though we both knew it wasn't. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a tall, dead tree through the curtain of snow. But trees don't move, trees don't turn to look at you. It stood maybe 8 feet tall, impossibly thin, like someone who had been starving for months. I couldn't make out all the details through the blizzard, and honestly, I'm grateful for that. What I did see was bad enough. Its skin was grey-blue, like the color of frostbite, and seemed to hang from its bones in tatters. The creature's head was wrong, too long, with yellow teeth that jutted out from its jaw. And its eyes, they glowed with a dull orange light, like dying embers. But the worst thing wasn't how it looked, it was how it made me feel. Standing there looking at it, I suddenly felt hungry. Not normal hungry, but a deep, painful emptiness that felt like it could never be filled. My stomach cramped so hard, I almost doubled over. Ghost growled, a sound I'd never heard him make before, part fear, part warning. The thing tilted its head, studying us. Then it spoke. "Margaret," it said, in a voice that wasn't one voice, but many, layered on top of each other. I heard a child's high pitch, an old man's rasp, and underneath it all, something that sounded like wind through dead leaves. I reached for my gun, more by instinct than any real hope it would help. My fingers were clumsy with cold and fear, but I managed to draw it and fire 3 times. The bullets hit, I know they did, but they seemed to freeze and shatter against the creature's skin, falling to the snow like tiny ice crystals. It smiled. At least, I think it was a smile. Then it was gone. 1 second it was there, the next it had vanished into the swirling snow. But I knew it wasn't really gone. I could feel it watching. "Run," I whispered to Ghost. And we did. We crashed through the forest, no longer caring about direction, just trying to put distance between us and that thing. Ghost suddenly veered left, and I followed without question. He seemed to sense where the creature was, avoiding it even though neither of us could see more than a few feet ahead. A howl cut through the storm, a sound like wind rushing through an old cemetery. It didn't sound like it came from any animal I'd ever heard. "What is that thing?" I gasped, my lungs burning from the cold air. Ghost just kept running, and I followed. The snow was getting deeper, slowing us down. My legs felt like lead, and my face was going numb despite my scarf. The creature appeared again, this time to our right, moving impossibly fast across the snow. It didn't leave tracks. It shouldn't have been able to move that quickly, not with how thin its legs were, but it flowed like water or smoke. Ghost barked a warning just before it lunged at us from within the whirling snow. I dropped and rolled, barely avoiding its grasp. Its long fingers brushed my jacket, and where they touched, the fabric froze solid, cracking like glass. We were being hunted, and the hunter knew these woods better than we did. Our only chance was to find shelter, somewhere we could defend, somewhere the blizzard couldn't reach. In the distance, I saw a dark opening in the side of a hill, the entrance to one of the old iron mines. It wasn't ideal, but it was our only option. "This way," I called to Ghost, and we changed direction, heading for the mine entrance. Behind us, the creature let out another bone-chilling howl. It knew where we were going, and somehow I sensed it was pleased. The mine entrance loomed before us, a black mouth in the hillside. I hesitated for just a second. Going inside meant shelter from the blizzard, but it also meant trapping ourselves. Ghost whined, looking back over his shoulder. "No choice, buddy," I said, and we plunged into the darkness. My flashlight beam cut through the blackness, revealing rusty tracks and rotting support beams. The air was stale, but warmer than outside. Our footsteps echoed as we moved deeper into the mine. I'd studied the old mining operations in this area when I first took the ranger job. This particular mine had been abandoned in the 1940s after an accident killed 3 workers. The locals avoided it, claiming it was bad luck. Maybe they knew something I didn't. "We need to find a defensive position," I told Ghost, though I was really just talking to keep my fear at bay. As we moved deeper, I noticed something strange. The walls of the mine weren't just bare rock. They had marks on them, symbols carved into the stone, so old they were almost worn away. And something else. Bones. Animal bones at first, then others, larger ones, human-sized. That's when I remembered the stories the old-timers told around campfires. Tales of the Wendigo, a human transformed by desperation and hunger in the wilderness, someone who had turned to cannibalism to survive, only to become something no longer human. Just a story, I'd always thought. Just a way to scare kids into staying close to camp. Now I wasn't so sure. My left hand was burning with cold. I looked down and saw the first signs of frostbite on 3 of my fingers, where the creature had brushed against my glove. The skin was white and waxy looking. Not good. We came to a fork in the tunnel. Ghost sniffed the air, then growled at the path on the right. "Left it is," I whispered. The tunnel sloped downward, taking us deeper underground. The air grew even colder, which made no sense. It should have been warmer away from the surface. My breath clouded in front of me. That's when we found them. Bodies. 3 of them partially frozen, hanging from the ceiling like meat in a freezer. 2 men and a boy, maybe 14 years old. Hikers who had been reported missing last week. I recognized the boy's red jacket. His name was Tyler. I'd been part of the search team looking for them. I was too late. Again, just like with Sarah. I felt the familiar weight of failure pressing down on me, squeezing my chest until I could barely breathe. But there was no time for that now. A scraping sound came from behind us. Ghost's hackles rose, and he turned to face the way we had come. "It's in here with us," I said. I quickly scanned the chamber. There were old mining explosives in a rotting wooden crate, probably unstable after all these years, but my only hope. My flare gun was still in my belt. A plan began to form. "Ghost, stay close," I said, moving toward the explosives. The Wendigo appeared at the entrance to the chamber, blocking our only way out. In the confined space, it had to stoop, its long limbs folded awkwardly, but it was still terrifying. In the steady beam of my flashlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. Its skin wasn't just frostbitten, it was torn, revealing glimpses of ancient yellowed bone beneath, and its eyes, they burned with hunger and something else, something almost human, despair. It had been a person once, someone lost in these woods, who'd made a terrible choice to survive. "Tyler," it called, using the voice of a woman. "Tyler, honey, where are you? Mom's worried." The voice changed, becoming deeper. "Help me, please. So hungry." I knew what I had to do. Keeping my flashlight trained on the Wendigo, I backed toward the explosives. "Ghost, here," I commanded. He came to my side, trembling but brave. My fingers were clumsy with cold as I loaded the flare gun. The Wendigo watched, its head tilted curiously. "You were human once," I said to it. "I'm sorry this happened to you." It lunged forward with that impossible speed. I fired the flare. Gun, not at the creature, but at the old explosives. The blast was deafening in the confined space. The tunnel entrance collapsed in a shower of rock and dirt. The Wendigo shrieked, caught beneath falling debris. I grabbed Ghost and dove behind a rock outcropping as the ceiling began to come down. Pain shot through my left hand as rocks crashed onto it. I screamed, but couldn't hear my own voice over the rumbling of the collapsing mine. Then silence. Thick dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. My flashlight had been smashed, but the flare still burned, casting everything in eerie red light. "Ghost," I called, coughing. A whine answered me. He was alive, thank God. I tried to move, and nearly passed out from the pain. My left hand was crushed, 2 fingers definitely broken, maybe worse. The rest of me wasn't much better. Cuts and bruises everywhere. In the fading light of the flare, I could see the Wendigo, half buried under fallen rock. It wasn't moving, but those ember-like eyes still glowed faintly. I looked over at the hanging bodies. Tyler's red jacket seemed to glow in the flare light. "I'm sorry," I whispered to him. I was too late. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The dust was getting thicker, harder to breathe. The mine was still settling, small rocks falling here and there. We needed to get out before we were buried alive. "Come on, Ghost," I said, forcing myself to my feet through sheer willpower. "One more time. Let's go home."